Good morning, colleagues. It's turned 9 o'clock. We are here for an early start today compared to yesterday, so just mind everyone to take your seats. A bit of housekeeping for those here present today. There's also a pharmacovigilance meeting next to us, so just bear that in mind as you leave and enter this room. We do assume that you were able to find this one in the right spot today, so we also expect you to do that later. If there are people from pharmacovigilance joining us, maybe they're in for a better session than the one they signed up for, but we'll just enjoy that they can stay here to learn about the future of AI, potentially also in pharmacovigilance. But there will be a number of really good discussion points today, where we'll discuss the AI reflection paper in this room and also online, and we'll leave that to our colleagues in a moment to go through that. There'll be a coffee break at 11 for your information. And then obviously we continue the discussions around smart regulation in the area of medicines life cycle with a panel discussion after the coffee break. And then we'll have a look into the AI roadmap following this, so really looking ahead. So I hope that will be a useful discussion for all of you today. I really appreciate the engagement yesterday. I've had a number of reach outs afterwards of people sitting online for 6 hours that really couldn't let go of it because actually it was quite informative and enriching. So I think we actually did well yesterday in discussing these topics and looking forward on this. But today I have the pleasure a little bit ahead of time. So I hope Gabriel is there with us and able to, in a moment, to share the walkthrough of the AI reflection paper that Gabriel Westman, who is heading up AI and data analytics at the Swedish Medicines Agency, is here to present to us today. And Gabriel is also a very important figure in our methodology working party and a good colleague of ours that have actually worked diligently on making sure we actually have the AI reflection paper coming so nicely together and in the public consultation at the moment. So Gabriel, I hope you are there and able to take us through the reflection paper.
Thank you for the opportunity to present on this topic. I will start now and hope that my image is coming along, and I hope that you read me well. Otherwise, give the feedback in the chat. So I'm here today to talk about the CHMP CVMP reflection paper on the use of AI in the medicinal product lifecycle, as you know, published in July this year, and currently open for public consultation, as it is a draft, hoping now to interact with stakeholders to make sure this lands in the right balance between regulatory stringency and external needs. So next slide, please. So starting with the objective, I should perhaps start to say that this is not a formal regulatory guidance document, but our first step to provide what we call considerations on the use of AI and machine learning in the life cycle of medicinal products. So really starting from drug discovery and following all the way into that post-authorization phase. And we know this is, of course, a rapidly evolving field, as you heard yesterday. So this is a description of our current experience and also an attempt to really stick with what we believe are more long-lasting principles rather than chasing specific examples, which might be very contemporary. It should, of course, be read both in coherence with legal requirements and overarching EU principles on AI, data protection, and medicines regulation. I've been the coordinating author for this work, but I'd also like to acknowledge contributions from my methodology working party colleagues, network experts, and of course, colleagues from the EMA. So first, you're starting with giving you an overview of the paper. Of course, this, I believe, is still quite readable on being around 15 pages, but still, I'd like for all of you to see the full outline. Starting with an introduction, just showing the landscape, and then the main part of this paper is what is called the discussion, following the EMA template for reflections papers. And we start with some general considerations on the technology, and then really try to follow the life cycle, giving examples and comments and seeing how and trying to detail how current regulatory standards can be met when applying these technologies, because it is really about, I think, bridging between the emerging skill set and competence within data science and AI, and bridging it over to the regulatory understanding, both in external stakeholders and sponsors, as well as in the network of assessors. So now you can see me as well, because many of the principles already existing for model-informed drug development, for biostatistics, for many of data management are already present and communicated in different GXP guidelines. But at least my impressions from interactions during scientific advice and qualification procedures is that sometimes perhaps applicants have invested in very well qualified data science staff, but that the full merge between the data science competence and the clinical competence has not been completed, so that there is some sort of gap and bridge also in external stakeholders in how to merge the existing knowledge of the pharma landscape with these emerging technologies. And this is, of course, something we also experience on the regulatory side of trying to bridge and use our multi-year regulatory experience in how to communicate how this can then be used to steer towards trustworthy, reliable AI that can really enable all phases of drug discovery until production use for patient safety and efficacy. We go then after the life cycle into some more technical aspects where we try to detail our views on data handling, on how to train models, develop, assess performance, how to interpret and explain them, and deploy them in a way that we believe is in line with GXP requirements. And then ending up with some sections that might be a bit unusual to have in a reflection paper, but we still believe are important because it's important in the general field of AI, and that is governance, data protection, integrity aspects, and ethical aspects. And as we do have some time set aside for this, I will walk you through the paper as a whole, and hopefully we can have a fruitful discussion afterward. Next slide, please. So starting, I think, with the positive, and then sometimes when you talk about risks and you talk about problems and you talk about regulatory requirements, you forget that starting off, we are, I believe, as regulators overall very positive of these new technology, and I think we should start there. I mean, if used correctly, we think this holds great promise in supporting anything: acquisition, transformation, analysis, interpretation of data within the full medicinal product life cycle. Of course, different applications, different use cases will have different levels of risk and requiring different levels of validation and risk management. I mean, we know that there's a general transformation, not only in drug development, but in healthcare as a whole. And of course, these developments, they follow hand in hand. We also know about some new risks, but we're also aware that there are likely risks we don't know about. So really proceeding in what may not be a minefield, but still a landscape which has probably both unexpected benefits as well as unexpected risks. We probably need to be extra cautious in avoiding patient safety risks, regulatory impact risks that may pull us back quite some building and create conservatism if we step upon a mine, if you allow that analogy. And of course, as regulators, we are very, very interested in keeping the integrity of clinical study results. And here we do see new conflicts emerging with practices within data science, which is inherently sort of stepwise and data-driven, which may align well, but may also not align very well with the view of the need for a priori definement of hypothesis and really being stringent in causal inference. As this paper addresses both the human and veterinary domains, we of course have tried to give some detail to when these two different domains different, for example, in ethical issues, in terms of available adjacent guidance and so on. Next slide, please. So going to the key principles, I mean, these are no news for anyone within drug development, but perhaps important to state that we are sort of playing the ball back on your side, that just by using new technologies, there are no free passes for not being able to explain where the data comes from, what has been done with it, how models have been built, and why. So we do expect that everything you create from algorithms, models, data sets, processing pipelines are validated as fit for purpose, are in line with the requirements for many aspects, and is documented in a way that is traceable and reviewable in a comprehensive manner. It should be sufficiently technically detailed to allow comprehensive assessment, both from a scientific and a technical level. And this, I think, is something we need to learn together. We are, of course, aware that there are many eager external stakeholders that find current regulatory practice somewhat conservative. But I think there are many different aspects need to be balanced here. And also just hearing different sponsors discussing, we understand that there's not a single uniform view on what is most needed and what is the best approach currently. Next slide, please. So we have talked a lot about a risk-based approach, and yesterday we also heard some description of risk. I think there is some taxonomy in terms of risk description that we need to create, hopefully some internal standardization, and hopefully across the Atlantic to start with. I mean, in one sense, everything applied to the medical domain is considered high risk, but we need some sort of we need some sort of spectrum also within that high risk to show what we believe is very high risk or something like that, high risk to us. I mean, medical devices has their own risk level numbering, but not all AI applied in medicinal life cycle is really medical devices. It might be only a research system used for clinical trials, and then still it may have a very high regulatory risk, although it doesn't affect the risk of the individual patient. And this, how to do this, I think we're still learning as we go along and create formal guidance. This may be more detailed, but currently we want to communicate the principle. I mean, that you have to have risk-based approach, you do your risk assessment, you plan for managing the risk and mitigate, and are open with how this is. And this is depending on the technology, how you use the technology, how much you allow the technology to influence whatever parameter you're using, whether it's a treatment decision or whether it's a statistical outcome. And of course may vary throughout the life cycle, while some parts are very stringent, as perhaps having a key endpoint for a late phase clinical trial, while pharmacovigilance might be slightly lower risk, as well as drug discovery, as we will hear later. Next slide, please. Starting with drug discovery, I think we had a very nice overview yesterday from Professor van Westen, and I think we also see that it is a well-established part of drug discovery. And at the first glance, it may be considered generally low risk, but discussing this, we've also identified that there might be some issues, ethical issues that developers need to consider, and that is that we don't end up with models that are discriminatory in their exploratory capacity, that we really are ending up with systems that are ideally good at finding drug candidates for all different kinds of patients, regardless of region and ethnicity, sex and age, and so on. Next slide, please. Moving to non-clinical development, I mean, risk is slightly higher, especially if there are data generated at this stage that is expected to contribute to the overall benefit risk balance during regulatory assessment, and then we might even end up in a stage where you really need a pre-specified statistical analysis plan to show that the data you have generated is suitable for hypothesis testing, and it's not too data driven or cherry picked, so to say. And we know that of course AI is excellent for analysis of all types of high dimensional data, and in non-clinical development you have a lot of imaging, a lot of other signals being captured, so we of course we see many use cases here. And personally I'm especially eager to see how these technologies can be used to follow the 3R principles in reducing, replacing, and refining the use of animals for non-clinical development. And of course, GLP general principles are applicable, and I mean this is mostly common sense, but there are also some specific guidelines already on computerized systems and data integrity, which may not all data scientists among sponsors are currently aware of. So there is a lot of wisdom there that is applicable to these emerging technologies. Next slide, please. Moving to clinical development, of course, we'd see a lot of regulatory interactions here. And we also see that many of the principles of GCP apply very well, although, of course, there are some new considerations that need to be done. I mean, the biggest thing is, of course, that we create models that are often of a size and architecture where human oversight is no longer possible because of the billions or even trillions of parameters used. And then, of course, there's more need to really log how is the architecture planned, how do the modeling logs look, how has it been validated and tested, what data have been used, how was the data being processed, and so on, so that we can really build quality from bottom up, so to speak, because the final product may be a black box, which is quite hard to fully explain. I mean, of course, it depends on also on how you use these models, and if it creates a very complex trial, if it infers new patient risks, of course, also this has to be assessed already when applying for the clinical trial and see whether the benefit risk for the protocol is positive as such. And of course, we know that this interacts with medical devices. Of course, we have been careful trying to stay away from what is not the EMA remit here, but we also acknowledge that when these devices are used within the clinical trial to generate data for regulatory assessment, it is not enough to just have your conformity mark, but also there may be additional requirements to see that the data generated is robust enough and to be used in a clinical trial, and also that, of course, patient safety and rights are well-being is being respected. Next slide, please. We see some challenges in understanding how these models interact with biostatistical analysis. In many cases, when these models generate an endpoint, it is really an expansion of the statistical analysis plan and should be treated as such. I mean, then it has a very special set of requirements, and you need to think about what is really a priori and a posteriori, how you prevent data leakage and so on. I'll come to that in a moment. In early stages, risks are often lower, but of course, anything related to patient safety, I mean, treatment design and dosing, anything affecting the patient per se is, of course, high risk in its own definition. Moving back to late stage, of course, we have the general problems of overfitting and data leakage. And I think anyone who has been practicing this field, including myself, know that although you have the best of intentions, it is very easy to have data leakage unintentionally or unconsciously, because there are so much data overlap, there is so much data symmetry, there are so many pitfalls in this area. And in some high-risk use cases from a regulatory impact perspective, we can only really trust in future calendar time. So probably if you generate a full primary endpoint in a late phase clinical trial, we're going to ask you to validate that model prospectively to eliminate any risk of data leakage, and also monitor, of course, things as model deterioration and how to create management plan if the model loses performance during the trial. A vision of mine and many of my colleagues is, of course, that we would like to see a future when models are shared, publicly open, and being built quality in the way that the open source community builds quality in algorithm-based software packages, that many are using them, that you are sort of cross-validating use cases, and that then use from one sponsor can really support the validity of another sponsor. Because if models are usable in many different settings by different sponsors, it also shows to the generalizability, and hopefully also for in terms of calendar time. Next slide, please. Precision medicine has been on the tongue of hype for many years. I don't think it is a hype. Sorry, that wording is wrong, but it's been very much in fashion, and now we are seeing the applications really reaching patients, and we of course expect that AI and machine learning may be used really also to individualize treatment, and that you may map disease characteristics, so patient genotype, or any type of wideband biomicropuddles, and have a model assessing what kind of treatment should be tailored for that specific patient. Could be patient selection, could be de novo design of product variants, or selection from a library. And of course, here we also see how will this then be described and communicated in the summary of product characteristics. And this will of course be a high risk use case. And when we get there, we will see that these first products will have a good support from the regulatory system, and frequent interactions is expected. Also, of course, using anything like this, we need to consider a fallback approach. What happens when the model is not performing? How should the prescriber act in situation where there's a technical failure, for example? Next slide, please. Moving to manufacturing, I think this is a point where we have more to learn. I know there is the quality innovation working group. I think that is on top of this. I think from the reflection paper, we have just reached the process of acknowledging that there's a lot of use cases here, and we are yet to fully understand the risk level and what level of description, validation, what should go in the dossier and so on. But we know that, of course, process design, scale up, quality control, batch release, many of these things are well suited for ML applications. We also know that there are already principles in the ICH that should be considered, and then there is also revisions that will hopefully address these more specific issues more in detail in relation to GMP in the future. Next slide, please. Moving to the post-authorization phase. Of course, I mean, we have great expectations here. We see also many use cases being applied already because, of course, post-authorization pharmacovigilance is a data-driven discipline, and then it suits very well what these models and algorithms try to achieve. We also know that in this case, there may be that the benefits of managing large volume data is that the current risks of human review can be mitigated through the use of AI models. So here the benefit risk balance in using, for example, perhaps incremental learning is different compared to late stage clinical trials, but it will always remain with the sponsor to show that the model is well performing, how it is monitored, how it is documented, so that the pharmacovigilance system as such is available for regulatory review. Next slide, please. Moving into some technical aspects, I mean, this is really often where discussions end up. I mean, how are we allowed to acquire data? Where do data come from? Are there any risk of data set overlaps? I mean, we see many examples of data leakage in other domains, and we expect that will happen also in when using registered data. There may be patient overlaps. One patient will be in more than one database. They may be resampled. They may end up in pharmacovigilance databases where there's not enough deduplication. I mean, the challenges are many, along with the opportunities. And we believe that the really documentation is key here, showing what you've done, where data comes from. I mean, there of course could be visions like having some sort of blockchain provenance proof of data, but this is currently much more a vision and a dream. That's something that is technically available, but in the future, showing where data comes from, that it has not been synthetically generated or completely made up, that will be a challenge for regulatory authorities in the future. As to the data, also remember that we are interested in really seeing that the data is representative and fair and relevant. It's not enough just for the data to be large, although that automatically mitigates some of these concerns. And if there are limitations, they should be clearly presented, and maybe alternative methods have to be presented side by side. If not, the full population can be addressed by the training data set. Next slide, please. I started talking about overfitting and data leakage, and I think we cannot talk enough about it. I think there will not be a single group or unit working with these technologies that will not end up there sooner or later. So as I say, my team, we all will do these mistakes. It's about being open with them. It's about flagging them. It's about looking for them. It's about having a culture where people are not afraid to say that they are wrong or have detected some anomaly. Because as looking at just the scientifically published papers in the field, there are so many examples of quite severe overfitting. And I think we will really need to learn how to get a grip on this issue if possible. We know that data leakage can be in many ways, although we see that, the data has been randomized, we've had a whole data set. There may be overarching study results, and maybe resemblances just because of it's been generated by the same sponsor protocol that makes, or it's been normalized together. There are so many pitfalls here where overfitting occurs during training, and then the performance during deployment is lower. Of course, you can mitigate internal generalizability by cross-validation, and you can also look for secular trends by splitting your data on calendar time rather than randomness, seeing whether data from year 1 can be able to predict data from year 2, for example. Next slide, please. Of course, looking at these highly complex models, interpretability is of course preferred. That means that you can really follow the data flow, understand how the model processes it. We do, however, understand that, I mean, this applies to decision trees, to random forests, to XGBoost, and so on. They are inherently interpretable. And that might be a regulatory advantage. And sometimes these models do, for example, for tabulatory data, I mean, an XGBoost performs very well and might be preferred for many reasons. But of course, realize that black box models, deep learning, large language models, for example, they cannot be interpreted, and then it is about showing explainability instead. Because the more you can explain or even interpret, the less you will have to validate and monitor. This is a balance between this. Can you understand how the model works? You might be a little bit less nervous about following every step, if you understand the analogy. But still, really, I think there's great hope in AI technologies to be used to really supplement. Now we have trained this model on this data. This is what the model have learned. This is what it makes of a single inference, so that both on a local level and on a global level, you can explain the model behavior. Next slide, please. Moving ahead into data protection and integrity. I mean, these are very important points. I mean, they're slightly outside perhaps the classical EMA or network remit, but we believe it's for public interest in it to feel safe in these technologies being applied both to registry data and to clinical trial data. I mean, we really need to have ensure that storage processing is really in accordance with GDPR. Everyone should have a look on if you can anonymize. Can you use synthetic data? Can you use differential privacy? Is it suitable for the specific use case? Or are you washing away too much of the detail that you really need to make the model work well? We also know that when you are creating the models, I mean, they do not only contain the wisdom that we want them to learn, but also a lot of actual memorization. And the larger the model, then the more they will remember. So the general principle, of course, that treat the model with the same risk level in terms of data protection as you would for the training data. Because these models can be attacked, you can find out whether a patient has been used to train a model, and you might even get more details out of it than that. Next slide, please. Moving into final stages, and then last but not least, we do have the ethical aspects. And here I think we have very good support from the ALTAI checklist, which I personally like very well, the self-assessment tool, which is also a manageable size, which is important to really see application and impact of documents. And of course, not remembering that human agency and oversight. I mean, what are we doing for whom? Who is in control? Who rules is very important. Technical robustness and safety we have talked about, and safety, of course, has both a regulatory impact and a patient safety perspective. Privacy and data governance we've recently covered. Transparency on what we do, how we do it, and what is done with the data. Accountability, and of course those general factors of societal and environmental well-being, diversity, non-discrimination, and fairness. And these are all very beautiful words, but it's easily that they are sort of being read, put on paper, but then not put in practice when the work is being done. So somehow sort of ironing these into the project, making sure that we return there and really look what are we doing? Are we following these general principles when developing our AI model? Because the human-centric approach should be there. I mean, we are there for patients and for no one else. We are there for the citizens of the European Union, if looking at EU regulators, and no one else. And that might sometimes need decisions that are not the most preferred ones for external stakeholders. Next slide, please. So concluding this, I mean, I'd like to stop at the very positive note that I hope that I start with. I mean, we see so many fantastic use cases. We do see some eagerness and some frustration that you cannot just let your hounds loose to chase what's out there because of this very conservative field. I mean, we do have our GXP standards. They will hold, and if you're unsure on how new technologies is to meet them, it's really up to the sponsor to show that the regulatory standards are met. You don't have a freeze pass just because the technology is complex. If you are using models on models, you are just using transfer learning, you have to show what you have imported is well performed, what that data training the foundation model comes from. There are no free passes used for using blocks that others are using, especially because standards sort of best practices in data science and AI may differ, or they do differ from the regulatory requirements as we see as regulators. So I think there will still be a lot of learning to be done on different levels. We need to listen to external stakeholders, but also I think company sponsors themselves have to integrate, as I said, their technical understanding with the regulatory and clinical understanding, and then it's where true value can really be generated on both sides. Returning to the risks, I believe careful mitigation will actually make the most quick progress, because if we do see accidents, if we do see scandals, it may set development back. It may affect the implementation of the AI Act. It may implement how regulators see this. So I think being fast but cautious is really the way to progress forward, not to have any scandals as we've seen in other aspects of drug development, and sometimes cannot be avoided. And of course, ending with the human, having really a human-centric approach, remembering for whom we are, that ethical aspects may sometimes limit what we want to do, but that this is a good thing in the long run. And with that, I will stop here and happy to discuss this later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gabriel, for this excellent introduction to the reflection paper. Briefly,
just before I forget, I think there's another slide just giving the credits, so we don't forget that. So next slide, please. So yeah, first here we would also like to invite. I mean, this meeting is one of the consultation points here, as you know. But I also want to inform you that we do receive written inputs all up to into the 31st of December. And next slide, please, just for the credits and the contacts. As to the reflection paper process, we have Fia Westerholm at the EMA, and as for this workshop and anything related to Kate, of course, we have Luis Pinheiro at the EMA, and also has been deeply involved in the reflection paper. Now I stop. Thank you.
Thanks, Gabriel, for being complete in this sense. Briefly, I'm Kit Roes, the chair of the Methodology Working Party, who has embraced the reflection paper. But as Gabriel acknowledges, it already started before the Methodology Working Party took shape, and has had lots of contributions throughout the regulatory system in Europe to get where we are now. A practical point, we see questions coming into the chats, but we will postpone them until we've had the 7 perspectives presented as we scheduled. So we will get back to the questions, but later in the discussion this morning before the break. And maybe one perspective from my end before we move to the different perspectives that we are willing to hear. I think, and we see that more generally as a methodology working party, we are developing reflections and guidance in settings where we can't just build on decades of experience, and that has been the situation before. So some of the guidance we have in place were developed after decades of experience. We're in a totally different situation now. We have to get our considerations and careful reflections in place while we're actually learning at the same time. And I think particularly this area is an example of that. So very much in my view, we are here today also to listen and learn rather than to defend a reflection paper from a regulatory perspective. So I would very much appreciate an open discussion, because I think we are, almost obliged also towards our society to learn fairly quickly in this area. With that said, I give the floor to Peter.
So thanks very much, Kit. Thanks very much, Gabriel. So the idea is that we will have some panel interventions. Panelists have been chosen based on perspective, if you like, or stakeholder grouping. And after each panelist, we may, if we remain on time, just allow 1 or 2 interventions from other people from that grouping, if you like. So just to give you an example, Christina Meissner from the Austrian agency is going to talk about an inspector's perspective, and then if any other inspectors or people with an inspection experience want to intervene, if we've got time, we'll take 1 or 2 interventions, and then we'll go to the next perspective. So with that, straight to Christina, please, for inspection perspective from the Austrian agency. Where are you, Christina?
I'm over here.
Hello, Christina.
Yeah, I'm also not only representing my agency, I'm also representing the Quality Innovation Group that I'm a member of. And you have seen our slides that Jörg has presented yesterday, parts of them. And so you also know that we have this topic AI and also the digital novel technologies on our agenda as well. And so we want to take the opportunity to cross-link it with you, because you're coming from a clinical perspective. And so what I found really interesting in the paper is that there are certain things that are relevant for us as well, right? Especially if we look into your points that you have with training, validation, and testing. That's very relevant for assessors and also on the clinic, also on the quality level. The same is true with model development. And for the GMP perspective, we are more interested in performance assessment. So that's something that we have to focus on while we are in the field, right? As well as, of course, the deployment and the data protection. And we are very concerned about, so the AI is here already in GMP. We have seen applications. We have seen that companies are starting in the R&D phase where they are substituting models with experimental data so that they can be quicker on the market, right? Not only with the development of picking their right drug candidate, but also with, if you look into, for example, mixing studies of a reactor, we can use AI and modeling there. We see things where we have algorithms that have been there already, been substituted with AI. And here we also have to find out, does this make any change for us in the GMP implement? For example, if I have a visual inspection of flasks, does this really change the outcome? And on the other hand, we see implications in the PQS, in the pharmaceutical quality system, where we have seen AI implemented in training, AI implemented in CAPA, chatbots that are used for complaint management and all of these kind of questions. And there are, of course, different risks for us, right? And so our idea was a little bit to understand how much is AI involved in the batch decision, right? And if it's involved in the batch decision, of course, the risk is bigger than if it's just a supporting tool. And we are at the beginning. Although the technology is there, we are at the beginning and understanding how we can deal with that. And we're very happy if you have some ideas for us as well.
So, Christina, thank you for your intervention, and thank you also for bringing me back on track that the perspective was not just an inspection GMP one, but a quality innovation and manufacturing in general. My personal view is we really need to hold hands very tightly, because the idea is that the reflection paper and what comes afterwards will be AI and not AI clinical, which it could be very easy for the manufacturing side to go its own way. And I think there are advantages to keeping the dialogue in a common forum, if you like. So given that the scope of the intervention, and we do have a few minutes, was manufacturing in the broadest sense, we've got time for one or two interventions if anybody would like to. Maybe we'll start in the room specifically on this topic. Anybody wish to intervene? I wouldn't want Christina to be the lone voice on manufacturing. Would anybody who has any of the panelists, or while people are thinking about it, I knew you would save me. Gabrielle, yes. Some reflections in response to Christina.
I think that there is work to be done in merging how we speak about these challenges, but I honestly and fully believe that what we need to describe in terms of the technical and scientific requirements in a risk-based hierarchy is really very much the same in manufacturing as in clinical applications. We come from different traditions and also different sort of pipelines in terms of how organizationally in the network. So we probably need to reach out and shake hands and sit along the same table and learn each other's language and challenges and everyday practice in this. But I don't see why we could not make guidance, both general and specific, that really fulfills the requirement and expectations of both parties. I stop there. Thank you.
So, Gabrielle, thank you. And maybe, Gabrielle, you'll be our new best friend, okay? And maybe Kit, as the chair of the Methodology Working Party, can find ways of ensuring that that there's a bridge to the Quality Innovation Group, because I think that'll be a really important collaboration going forward. So I hand back to you, Kit.
Yeah, thanks, Peter, and we will certainly do so. I already made that note, mental knowledge yesterday, because I think it's an important area to cover. We switch gears to the academic research perspective and give the floor to Peter Rijnberg from Erasmus University Medical Center, but also heading the Darwin EU initiative or coordination center. And I see you are online, if I'm correct. Yeah.
I am. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed reading the reflection paper, and AI is developing so fast that we continuously need to reflect on its impact and assessment. And that requires a lot of new research methods and approaches. One of the challenges, I think, though, is that it's not really straightforward how to define AI exactly. And the introduction of the reflection paper, it's referred to large and complex models, machine learning methods. And I think it's really important to realize that also simple models like regression with a few variables require the same type of assessment and monitoring, and we need to build methods to do the full landscape or assess the full landscape of models. And I think that even the term AI Act in that sense is a little bit misleading, because it may result in discussions on whether this specific solution is AI or not. And that also applies to some extent, I think, to the reflection paper, that my advice would be to be very explicit that we talk about algorithms in the broadest sense, and we need to assess them all equally. When I focused on the use cases in the paper, there are many very interesting opportunities already there, but I think there will also be a very strong focus on predictive modeling, especially for leveraging the heterogeneity of the treatment effect. And predictive modeling will be very important to identify patients of high and low risk, and that will require a lot of resources, especially on how to evaluate these models in that smaller set of patients. I also see a lot of opportunities for large language models, doing research at the moment on clinical definitions, phenotype algorithms, codes, translations from text to code, analytical code, and also especially in the area of quality assessment of data, there will be a lot of opportunities for AI to further improve that field. I also had a look at the methodological aspects of that are written down in the paper. And one thing that I would like to mention is that there is a section about the need for balanced training sets. And I think that will require a bit more depth and research, because if it's referring to class imbalance, for example, that will impact model calibrations, and we need to have methods to correct for that with recalibration. But if it's referring to fairness of the models, which was also alluded to in the earlier presentation, it's not very straightforward how to accommodate that. And I think the text should be a little bit more expanded on that, because by definition, a model should be discriminative, otherwise it's not useful. So that really requires a bit more thinking to make it explicit. And then for model validation, I think what needs to be a bit more stronger in the text is the value of external validation. It was discussed in the presentation earlier, but I think in the document it would be useful to have a section about that and explain how we should do that and at what scale before a model becomes accessible or acceptable. And that would help also to refer to, for example, the tripod statements, which is a standard on how to report on models. Tripod stands for transparent reporting of multivariable prediction models for individual prognosis and diagnosis. And that's a very nice standard that we should probably follow to make sure that we can reproduce our models and that the whole process is really transparent. And then I'd like to close with just mentioning that in the Netherlands, a lot of work is being done in creating a so-called innovation funnel for valuable AI in healthcare. And I would really recommend to have a look at that, because that tool was promoted by our Ministry of Health, and it supports the innovation process in 5 domains: value, application, ethics, technology, and responsibility. And at the moment at Erasmus MC, we are testing and refining that funnel with many other people in the field, and we will learn a lot from its application in many domains in our hospital. And I think that this document would be interesting for you to read and could provide additional input for the reflection paper. And I'd like to stop there.
Yes, thanks very much, Peter, for highlighting, I think, a number of important points. And following the format we're in, before we maybe give Gabriel a reaction flow, any parts to add from a more academic research perspective? Yeah, I see Martin Bosch.
Yeah, thank you, Martin Bosch, Medical University of Vienna. Yeah, I mean, I would fully support of this point that we have to think about what's really specific to AI models compared to other models. And I think it also shows well in the reflection paper that in principle, for example, when it comes to confirmatory conclusions in the context of confirmatory trials, that actually very similar principle apply as in general for the analysis and conduct for these trials, where pre-specification is key. And I think it's still good that this is sort of restated in this reflection paper, because I also see that in the different communities, sort of there are different approaches, and the machine learning and AI community, and they have a very incremental approach, probably also because it's such a dynamic field. And I see it also as being member of an ethics committee at our university, that we often struggle with protocols that have AI methodology in there, with the detail of description of these methods, which is at a quite different level as we are used from more standard statistical methods. Maybe I want to pick one more topic that's also shortly mentioned in the reflection paper, is about how to handle updates of a machine learning model, or if there are changes in the data generation process, where it's stated that bridging studies are needed. And I think this is something where more detail on how such bridging studies would look like, what kind of evidence is actually needed if something is changed in these models. And we see that, I mean, these models are regularly updated, since it's such a dynamic field. And I think there a lot of thought has to go into how to make this, on the one hand, feasible, so that innovation is not blocked, but on the other hand, to keep the safety of the patients.
Thanks very much for adding that perspective. Ine Schottheim-Rusten from the University of Namur. So your hand raised as well.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. I really like the approach of the reflection papers to focus on the life cycle of the medicinal product, and kind of going through the stages and the examples of how it can be used. And what I kind of missed was a little bit more consideration coming from model-informed drug development. We have been doing this for years and have a lot of experience, and kind of there you have other kinds of models. There could still be AI, but kind of you have a suite of different models that are used. And you kind of, I think some of the considerations and lessons learned from that is that kind of we really need to have the strategy that span through the whole of the life cycle development, and kind of to have some considerations on that into this document or in the roadmap would be really helpful, because I think that would cover some of these aspects where you kind of iteratively build the reliability or the credibility of the method, be that the AI systems, the research system, the inferential system that you build, how you propagate your data and your knowledge through the development. And I think kind of there you can really start to have some considerations and how you use the methods in tandem, and how you kind of step out and confirm with a randomized trial or whatever, and you still use that opportunity to build and test the reliability of the AI system. So I think kind of some considerations on how you can go through these phases and still kind of have that overall strategy to end up in a situation where you can use your AI system would be really nice to see there. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for indeed providing the perspective more from a model. Yeah, I think the link to model-informed drug development and the overall picture, I think that's actually quite an important perspective. If it's okay, Gabriel, I see your hand raised, but I give Gerard Western first the floor, and then we'll give you an opportunity to reflect briefly. Gerard, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to echo some of the points by Peter. They're already on mark, especially also the fact that shallow learners, not necessarily only deep learning, is to be considered in the scope. And this is also true for visualization and dimensionality reduction methods, all that are used to make decisions. So I would try to capture them. But I would like to expand a bit on his point on the need for external validation. I think that the performance assessment section can be expanded. It's a very good start, but there's room for more. For instance, also being aware of bias in the data, because bias in the data will directly influence the quality and the reliability of your performance assessment, whether it be in external validation or in cross-validation, as is mentioned in the paper. So I've gave an example on this to a few people here, so I think it's essential to put some more information there. And finally, yeah, the balancing of data sets. Maybe it's also good to mention the ability to over or undersample under certain conditions with stringent regulation, but at least have a viewpoint on the ability of these applications.
Yeah, thanks, Gerard. And I will give the floor to Gabriel after a very brief comment from me. I think we are spending a bit more time on this discussion, but I think this is actually the area where we might not be there yet in terms of understanding all the scientific principles and the area where we learn. But the floor to you, Gabriel.
Yes, and thank you for these, I think, very helpful comments. And of course, I mean, already I think we agree with a lot of them. But I'd also like to remind us that currently there is also a threshold of how descriptive in detail we can be in a reflection paper, and that some of this will be much further developed in the formal guidance that there is awaiting, and hopefully in 24 and 25, I think, starting from hopefully clinical development and pharmacovigilance, and then trying to catch up on manufacturing. I'd still like to make a few comments on how we've thought as so far to help you also further comment and help us in this. As to the need for a new guideline and where to sort of make that discrimination on what is covered here. I mean, we know that there are many definitions of AI as there are researchers or speakers on the topic, but what we really find is new is that the size of models becomes far beyond what is humanly apprehendable, and that introduces new dimensions of risk and also new opportunities. So comparing, for example, for a linear regression, I believe the regulatory system is very well equipped currently to understand how the principles of a priori versus a priori hypothesis testing, assessing linear regression model validity and so on is currently well within the biostatistical principles. It's not easy, but there's a lot of professional experience there, which is well integrated in the process of drug development, while we do see new dimensions coming in here, which we have tried to address. But I think that the definition may be developed further. And of course, also I like to acknowledge that shallow learners may be more challenging than what we think, although their behavior might be well explained. Their full performance in a very large data set may be where just the size of the data is what is humanly inapprehendable in one sense. So there are many dimensions in this, and I think we need to further elaborate on the scope. As to
Gabriel,
why we are addressing some very perhaps obvious things to some readers is that we see that those new talents coming in from data science are not always fully informed on what is very long-standing principles of biostatistics and inference. So we really need to merge these different fields and moving into incremental learning. I mean, this is really where push comes to shove. And in Sweden, I know that nationally, and I'm part of this, we're on an academic level trying to define something called the safe learning space, which might be a sort of a regulatory accepted space where model change can occur, a little bit similar to how the FDA is thinking. I will stop there and let other speakers in, but really thank you for the comments.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Gabriel, because I think you're kind of also preempting. We have some additional time for discussion after we've learned from the different perspectives. So I think it's important to move to the next perspective, but I think it clearly triggers where the areas to learn and set next steps.
Thanks.
Over to you, Peter.
Thanks, Kit. No, really interesting discussion.
Yeah.
This is going exactly how we wanted it to go. So next intervention is from Milana Trukal, who is head, I think it would be fair to say, head of digital health as a policy officer at the European Patient Forum. So a patient perspective, please, Milana. Where are you?
I'm here.
Oh, over there. Hello.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And yeah, we would just I mean, I would like to start by saying that we
I
very
make a
much.
suggestion.
Yeah?
Thank you. Yes.
Yes, I'll do that,
We can
yeah.
see you. Yes, now that's perfect. Thank you.
I would just like to start by saying that we very much welcome the reflection paper, and we support the fact that the EMA is trying to keep up with emerging technologies and new developments, and trying to understand how these can be applied to support safe and effective development and use of medicines. In this regard, we really much welcome the risk-based approach outlined in the paper. And indeed, we agree that the use of AI in different phases can have different risks. The amount of risk. And as, for example, in the discovery phase, it can be lower. And then if we compare it to the clinical trials, then it can be higher. And we would really like to stress the importance of this and make sure that the patient safety is indeed a guiding principle throughout. And that any risks to patient safety are at the top of the list of the risks that need to be minimized and prevented. And so the paper says that the advice on risk management will be further developed and further reflected in future regulatory guidance. But for us, this really should be the priority and should already be developed further in this very document. We understand that we are learning as we go, as it has been already said, but it really, I just would like to stress that this should be the priority for any future guidance. We would also like to welcome the acknowledgement that when using AI in healthcare, new risks are indeed introduced, and this is particularly true for the potential bias in data. And so we have a few months ago done a survey for patient organizations and individual patient advocates, and before that also a survey for individual patients. And the survey was about the perception of risks and benefits that patients have when it comes to AI in healthcare. And really the risk that was the most voted, so the risk that patients perceive as the biggest for them was the risk of bias and then the discrimination. So we're really happy to see that there is a focus on this in this paper. And also we are happy to see that it is recognized the need to prioritize explainable AI, but it would be great for us to expand even more on this and really try to avoid the acceptability of the black box model as much as possible. And we welcome of course, the references to existing regulations such as GDPR, MDR, IVDR, but and also the upcoming AI Act. But perhaps we should also mention any references, any connections to the EU Cybersecurity Act. It has been said this morning that we cannot stress enough the data leakage needs to be prevented. So this is why, indeed, the Cybersecurity Act should be included in the document, and possibly also the upcoming European Health Data Space. We also particularly welcome the section on ethical principles, the mention of human oversight, and also all the Altai assessment lists. We also welcome the reference to human-centric approach, and the link also to the development and deployment of AI should also include patient-reported outcomes and experience measures. However, there is one thing that we feel is missing at the moment, and this is the communication and information to patients and healthcare professionals. So we believe that a specific reflection is needed on this information, so on the use of AI models especially in the highest risk parts of the drug development, such as in the clinical trials and, let's say, when it comes to dosing, for example. We would just like to see something more on this. And I think I would stop here. Thank you.
Milana, really interesting. It's always essential to get a patient perspective, and it always surprises me. So I think your point on communication, and it linked perhaps in part to explainability, is perhaps a little blind spot on our side. And I think, thank you for pointing it out. I just highlight that one in a very rich set of feedback. Anybody else, patient rep or not, on a patient perspective? I don't know, George Palioros, if you're connected from Athens. Anybody want to intervene to complement Milana's intervention?
Hi, Peter. This is
Hi, George. Go ahead, sir.
Hi. I'm sorry I cannot switch on my camera. That was a very interesting positioning from EPF. I really like that, and of course, I'm very happy about having the reflection paper out there. For me, I wrote it also yesterday. We speak a lot about risk. And we rightfully take into account all the risks that AI brings with it. I think we need to spend a little more time on the benefits, and eventually it's all about the benefit risk balance. So we need to also see what we expect to get out of AI, how we make sure that we get that, how we make sure that we get it in a timely manner. These are the things that I would like to see a bit more in the discussion generally, not only in the reflection paper. Thank you, Peter.
George, again, thanks for reminding us of that. And it is very easy as regulators to become focused on the risk and the risk mitigation, whereas it's sometimes implicit when perhaps it should be explicit that what we're trying to do is to realise the potential benefits for patients and society. I was interested yesterday when there was the comment about ageism, and my brain was telling me that actually I would imagine use of AI could be enormously beneficial to the elderly and the very elderly and frail. Extrapolation of data sets to patient populations that are not normally included in the clinical trials, for example. So this is a really nice point, George. Thank you. I don't see any other hands, so I think I'm going to hand back to you, Kit.
Yeah, thanks, Peter, for the input so far. And we move to the perspective from actually the physicians. And I'm happy to give the floor to Elena Petelos, if I pronounce it right. And I think it's on. Yeah.
But I'm here.
Yeah, you're there.
Good
yeah,
morning.
thank you. Yes, from the.
So I'm from the Forum for Primary Care, but here I'm from the HCPWP. So let us be clear. Huh?
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I'm not in representation of different hats I wear or academia where I'm based, but of the Healthcare Professionals Working Party. I think most of you know what the Healthcare Professionals Working Party is, but nevertheless to say it comprises 22 organizations, so most specialties represented there. The topic is not new, but it's new in terms of targeted consultation. Some of the entities within the HCPWP have already responded in the consultations, whereas others are preparing their briefs to meet the end of the year deadline. Every single one of them, and it's difficult to capture key messages for everyone, but every single one is very happy with this development, and we think it's very timely and a very comprehensive good start. And we have had comments in the brief responses we collected, with approximately just over 1/3 of responding specifically for this meeting. Very good scoping, very happy to see this effort from the EMA, echoing patients' comments on that. Some people have also mentioned that they're already using in their specialties different AI tools, mostly narrow AI, and also in academic medicine and training. Some of the things we mentioned yesterday, but not earlier today, although I did not comment. So anything from ChatGPT to academic plagiarism testing to training younger physicians. Pulmonary function tests, digital pathology, so many different tools that are also changing organizational workflows, which is not something we discuss a lot, but it changes practice and it may affect safety and effectiveness, of course. And most of the specialties are very happy that the life cycle approach has been incorporated in this document. Indeed, starting from non-clinical development with a huge value, of course, potentially also for repurposing. And there's mention, of course, in looking also at health records, health records or richer data sets or even payer sets to see how this can be linked to discuss not only repurposing, but also safety and effectiveness and post-marketing stage. We echo, I think, largely every single organization echoes patient comments in terms of ethical considerations, trustworthiness, and potential bias aspects. If I may say, because as I said, I wear different hats, the document is a very technical document. And we had comments about the need to mention more specifically special populations. And that the term special populations is not mentioned at all. For somebody with more technical background, looking at the non-discriminatory aspects and class aspects discussed in the technical part, that is clearly there, but perhaps also consider the language aspect. I think it's just under a month ago that the WHO released, I do not know how many of you are aware, I think the ethics brief was mentioned yesterday, but I didn't think, perhaps I missed it, the regulatory considerations for clinical trials was released a month ago from WHO. It's also an equally technical document with slightly divergent language, including in terms, for example, of integrity of data. So we hope to have also the EMA look at more harmonized language and simpler language, potentially also not only for patients or lay audiences, but for healthcare professionals. We think is also potentially another role for the EMA to look at potentially developing guidance for development evaluations, quality assurance of AI tools being used. There are intersecting pieces of legislation coming out from the HDS implementation to the AI regulation to the NIS2 for cybersecurity. So we hope to see a little bit more scoping for that. And critically, we think it's important to also consider that for drifts in methodology and development of testing, there should be continues to extend possible communication with specific specialties. We also have the HTA regulation coming up, and we think this may drastically change how we evaluate and appraise medicines in an iterative manner. Then finally, also to say, this is very little time to capture many different perspectives, so we hope to be able to release something more targeted in the weeks to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much for providing this perspective, and I'm taking a few key points there, and that's also in tune with the environment. I think it's across your comments. So both in terms of language use, the HTA developments, and also making sure that we speak the same language. I think actually the communication aspect, I think, is very well highlighted. Also here, same question as before. Additions or further reflections from this perspective? Yes, please.
So good morning, everyone. I'm working for the European Respiratory Society. So in our society, we have a lot of conditions, GP, nurse who are focused on the respiratory care. So I think most of the time that I heard from our members around this kind of issue is around the precision medicines, this kind of like sections, which we are mentioning in these topics right here today. So what they're concerned around is around the liability and also the responsibility around how to use AI in their routine care to the patients. Because the thing is, traditionally, for example, for a GP, they are actually the one who provide the care to the patients. So they are the one who responsible for the treatment decisions to the patient as well. But here we are using artificial intelligence. So after we're using this artificial intelligence, no matter it is like in practice decisions or actually is a decisions whether the patient is actually taking in their home, that if there is something go wrong, so who will take the responsibility and who will take the liability on these treatment decisions at all? So this is one of the discussions that a lot of our member has actually mentioned in our discussion in the eHealth group. Because I should mention that we have actually got an eHealth group in our society, which is focusing on how to use technology to support patients' care. So another points that our member has always like talked about is actually around a gray area when they are using different kind of like technology, for example, especially for the connected platform, the kind of technology to treat patients for patient care in that sense. Because when you're talking about precision medicines, we're talking about we are using patients' data to personalize a medicines or a treatment to an individual person. So for example, in respiratory conditions, asthma is a variable condition. So this kind of like precision medicine is very important to them. So in terms of this kind of connected system, we have, for example, we have smart inhalers. So smart inhalers, it could be actually, there are two sessions over there. One option is the smart inhaler can be manufactured by the pharma company directly, which include the medicines over there. And then another session is we could actually got the technology company to incorporate a sensor over there on top of the existing medicine or inhaler on that medicine point. So in that kind of like, if we have already implement the artificial intelligence inside the smart inhaler, so if there is something goes wrong again, so who will take this responsibility and liability? So this is something that we are pretty concerned around that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for providing this perspective. I think this is actually quite challenging because some of it, I think, is actually close to actually delivering healthcare, and that might not be fully captured by the reflection paper as is, but it certainly does contain components there. If the labeling or as a companion diagnostic or what drives the treatment decision, it's at the interface. So I think it's a relevant additional perspective provided. Thank you. If not, we can move to the next perspective. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed. And Ricardo Carapeto from the Spanish Medicines Agency, providing a veterinary perspective. Ricardo's been quite active in the Big Data Steering Group. So looking forward to hearing from you, sir.
Thank you very much. And good morning, everybody. Can you hear me well?
Loud and clear.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the invitation and to allow me to provide my view on this interesting topic. First of all, as brief introduction, the veterinary sector is a bit forward in comparison to the human sector, but I have to say that applicants are starting to think in this innovative tools for the development that we are starting to receive questions from them, and we have to build this our own capacities and also to explore potential applications. So it's very important to have this kind of reflection papers already out. For me as a regulator, the main concern I have with this kind of tools is about the transparency, because in my view we have an obligation with the society of being transparent in our decisions, and of course an obligation with the applicants in being transparent also and predictable in our decisions also. So it's for me basic to take a lot of care on how do we assess the methods that are used, and Gabriel has already mentioned that. But I wonder if we as assessors, preclinical assessors, will have the skills to make such validations. So that is something to think about. That is something that we have to think about. And also it has been mentioned the potential biases. So I think that it will be necessary also to think and discuss on how to make the training to the algorithms to try to avoid this kind of biases as much as possible. So I think those are, in my view, fundamental and crucial things. At a practical level, I am environmental risk assessor. So that belongs to the preclinical part of the dossier, and the reflection paper focuses more on the clinical part. But I think that the preclinical and the environmental risk, as I'm more interested in that, obviously, could largely benefit from these new tools, as we are already using mathematical models to predict how do substances behave in the environment. So I see that the potential use of machine learning technologies would be I would be very optimistic about that. For the environment and substance and the assessment of substances, we have to think also that there are 3 executive agencies across the European Union that are regulating on chemical substances. One of them is EMA, but there are also 2 other important agencies as EFSA and ECHA that are also regulating on different chemical substances. all the three of us are making environmental risk assessment, and the basis of the environmental risk assessment is the same in the different regulatory frameworks. So I see a potential place for collaboration with the different agencies in the future development of models, etc., for the environment. And of course, the use of data for training models on data that we have already available for different chemical substances and how do they behave in the environment. We can expand our capacity of providing data if we take on board these other agencies. So it's something to think about. The way we carry out the environmental risk assessment basically has been was fixed around 30 years ago, and we have been having the same old-fashioned environmental risk assessment for the last 30 years. And there is a huge debate now. Well, maybe huge is not the word, but there is a debate that is started now about making updating the way we carry out environmental risk assessment, not only in our framework, but in other frameworks also. And maybe this is there is a possibility of incorporating this kind of tools in a future environmental risk assessment. Maybe not in thinking in letting machine learning technologies to take decisions, but at least to flag particularly risky substances, or to flag which environmental compartments would be at more risk. And also final idea or question to Gabriel or to whoever. For carrying out environmental risk assessment and for calculating or predicting how will substances behave in the environment, we have developed different mathematical models. They are pretty complex. They were developed by the Joint Research Center years ago, and it's kept updated by them. And I wonder if that is also a potential possibility that could save us some uncertainty when we talk about validation of models, etc. If there is a possibility of developing models or algorithms by ourselves, by regulators, and letting applicants to use them with the data they have, if that is also a potential possibility in the future. And I think that would be my views on the topic. I don't know if that is what you expected, but I hope so. So thank you very much for your attention.
Ricardo, very interesting. Actually, it wasn't what I was expecting, but that doesn't mean it actually exceeds my expectations. Just a couple of observations from me. I mean, I think everybody in this audience will be aware environmental risk assessment, as you say, has been done in largely the same way in the context of pharmaceutical assessment for many, many years. But things are about to go through a period of rapid evolution with the increased importance of that environmental risk assessment in the new pharma legislation that's currently working its way through Council and Parliament. The collaboration with other European agencies was touched upon in Pierre Paolo's presentation yesterday. My colleague Kim Berenguer here coordinates that on behalf of the EMA, which focused, I think, largely, not exclusively, but largely on the sort of office support efficiencies side of things. But the use of AI in assessment of products, be they chemicals, be they foods, be they medicines, could be an area for further expansion. And making that link to the JRC could be an interesting addition to that collaboration. The idea of regulators as model and app developers that we then provide to our stakeholders and applicants, I think is a nice idea. Whether we find the resources and the expertise to do that, well, why not? It would be rich area also for collaborative regulatory science projects, wouldn't it? I'm thinking forward. Now, I just spoke too much. Other views, particularly from a veterinary perspective, but also from an environmental risk assessment, because that was the other angle. Anybody wish to intervene? I'm not seeing any hands in the room. Ricardo, I think you had it covered, sir. So let me hand back over to Kit. Thank you very much, Ricardo.
Yeah. Thanks, Peter and Ricardo. Next, we move to the perspective from pharmaceutical industry, which will be initially given by Stephen Pike, who we've also heard yesterday already giving some inputs. Floor is yours, Stephen.
Thank you very much. Just as Professor Westman sought to explain that in creating the reflection paper, it was important to achieve a balance between understanding the benefits of AI and the risks. I think similarly, I want to begin by just making some remarks of a positive nature about this paper, which I think is very welcome for our sector, is very helpful, in part, of course, because any guidance from regulators is welcome and helpful, but also I think particularly in this context where AI is still relatively in its infancy in our sector, but accelerating very fast. So the attempt to write down something coherent and helpful is incredibly welcome, and we appreciate that. One aspect, again, just as I begin my remarks, one aspect I think we all want to particularly call out as well as a positive and welcome aspect of the paper is the focus on trustworthy AI and the importance of this technology being perceived as trustworthy. I think in our sector, in our industry, I think we all understand that for all of the stakeholders, it's important that we are understood to be acting in the interest of patients ultimately. And so that's very helpful. The other thing I wanted to call out as a positive is the coherence that comes through in this paper with regard to other existing regulations and guidances. We've already talked about, or I've heard remarks have been made about pre-specification, for example, as a guiding principle elsewhere in the regulatory guidance body and being referenced again here. And there were comments in the room earlier about the potential to look for and ensure coherence with the approaches of model-informed drug development, and we would certainly welcome those. Coherence across the regulatory framework makes it simpler to comply with the guidance, with the regulations, makes it easier for us to understand where the boundaries are around what is permitted use and what is not. So that coherence, I think, is welcome, and there may be further opportunity to ensure coherence elsewhere. In terms of moving on to areas where perhaps greater thought might be welcomed or additional guidance or clarity might be welcomed, one is around data and the potential for bias. Now, it's sort of implied, although not explicitly stated, that one can expect that because of the potential for bias in the data that's used to train the algorithms, coming through in ways that can be anticipated but often unanticipated, or in areas where it's almost impossible to mitigate fully and confidently against. If we are to assume that bias is almost an inherent part of the kind of the groundwork which is going to lead to the development of tools, then one of course has to look also at the performance of AI in practice, and that the inputs and the outputs, the data and then the performance, if one can look at it in that way, become complementary aspects of understanding the application and the way it's to be used. And although it's sort of implied in the paper, I would encourage a sort of greater emphasis and perhaps more explicit relationship being drawn out between those two. As I say, I think we have to understand that the tools that we have, the data that we have will always be potentially imperfect. The question then is, how do we mitigate the risks and how do we understand the relationship between the two? There are a number of features which I think will follow, and I will reference just a few of them here if I may. One rather obvious one, sponsors and others, as we develop AI tools, will be seeking very likely guidance from the Scientific Advice Working Party. And there's just a very simple practical question, which is, how do we understand the likely demand and ensure that there is capacity to support that in practice, particularly, again, in this early phase as we are learning about what the regulators require and how we can best satisfy those requirements. Another part here is around understanding what we mean by risk and where that risk resides. Again, it's, I think, implied and to some extent largely clear in the paper that when we talk about risks here, it's about regulatory risk, which is to say regulators wrongly or incorrectly approving a new medicine or allowing a new medicine to be used in a population where perhaps absent the use of AI, it might not have been so approved. And that seems, of course, entirely appropriate, but there are many risks which are entirely the sponsor's risk, the size of a study, and the use of AI to determine the size of a study. And just, again, a little more clarity around what we mean by risk in the context of the paper. Low, medium, high risk are referred to, but just a little clarity there might be useful as well. Guidance, of course, it's been signaled that guidance will follow the reflection paper, and that will be welcomed in due course. And we would hope that beyond that, something similar to an ICH type global standard, that may be some way off, but that would certainly be incredibly welcome and helpful. We understand we may need to wait for that. But in the meantime, it would be very helpful to have regular, certainly annular, perhaps more frequent, updates from the regulatory agencies, national and the European, around what they are learning from the applications that they are receiving. This is an area which we've acknowledged is fast moving, and the reflection paper is welcome, but one can't help but expect that there will be much to learn in the coming period. And so waiting for the emergence of the formal guidance might be rather too long a window to have to sit and watch and hope that it doesn't change too much from what we've seen in the reflection paper. And then finally, we saw in the slides from Thomas yesterday, there is a lot of cross-cutting legislation, cross-sector legislation in this arena. And obviously, this guidance, this reflection paper sits within it. And I guess it's just to encourage the agencies as they reflect and finalize on this reflection paper and think about what follows it, to be aware of the risk of inconsistencies in the approach or undesirable restrictions, constraints, or expectations, which will prevent us from getting the full value from this, obviously in a risk-aware manner. But the amount of legislation, the amount of guidance here, it does create a risk through the complexity that can give rise to, and we just urge the agencies to reflect on that carefully. That's what I have to say. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Stephen, and quite a few very important points made. And I think I do see bias in data as a red thread to many of the comments from different perspectives. So I think we might actually take some opportunity to expand on that discussion, and a couple of other points you put forward. I would gladly embrace, particularly I opened with we're in the learning phase. I think having something in place that we learn together on a regular basis, I would certainly embrace that. We do have something similar in place for biostatistics, actually, where we do have annual workshops across academia, industry and regulators to do precisely that. So I think we would definitely want to embrace that opportunity in this field. Any further reflections to add to Stephen's from an industry? Yeah.
Hi, yes, Ben Hughes from IQVIA. I'd like to build on a couple of Stephen's comments. He was talking about performance and elaborating that section. And one of the things we can think about is going as far as benchmarking and benchmarking data sets. So that it actually exists in the field of AI currently, that there are huge numbers and websites of different types of benchmarking data sets. And so we can embrace that and actually measure performance actually through data and through tests, and potentially recommend some of that work within the guidance paper. I think that reflects on how far you have to go through into explainability. Do you need to know something works, or do you need to understand exactly how it works? It can typically be one or the other. We don't really need to know exactly how our cars work. We need to know they've been benchmarked and they perform to the specifications for which we're buying them. The thing that would also help in the guidance paper is probably taxonomy that is compatible with a domain that is very software orientated. So we don't necessarily have representation from very software centric organizations here, but we're talking about a domain where here in the room we've interchangeably used the words model, algorithm, system, and they're actually three different things. And so depending on what you're trying to measure performance on or explain, or those are actually three different technical constructs, one that's really going down to how a CPU works and the algorithms, versus a system which is really a product that can generate models. Unless we pin down some of those basic constructs that are more software terminology, we won't know what we're trying to actually supervise within the guidance.
Thanks for both additions. I think the second part mentions is also part of the general question on being clear on our vocabulary and terms that we use. And I think you're highlighting 3, but I think actually the list is substantially longer. And I think I also kind of want to embrace the benchmark idea. I'm quite aware of one of them, the grand challenge, where we also see agencies from other regions participate actually in part of the benchmarking exercises. So I think there are opportunities there. Yeah.
Hi, Katja Andrich. I'm actually from GSK, not from Roche, although my paper says Roche. But I'm also a member of FPS AI subteam and have been working with Tom on FPS response to this paper. We'd just like to add, well, one point on definitions. I think, as Tom mentioned in his presentation yesterday, there's a lot of different people from different expertise working in this field, and often they use terms which are used interchangeably but don't mean the same thing, or they don't mean the same thing. And there's a lot of technical points made in this paper and a lot of technical terms in this paper. So we'd just like to make sure that potentially in the future paper, there is some kind of a glossary that really defines these terms systematically, and that we have consistency in this, which would definitely help with any kind of clarity in the future. And then the second point is more specifically on the definition of AI, which we would urge to make consistent with the OECD definition and the upcoming AI Act's definition, which is based on this definition of AI, again, for consistency reasons. Very briefly, but that's it from us.
Thank you very much. Points well taken. I think we should move in that direction. Okay.
Thanks very much indeed. So we've kept the best till last. Jesus Rueda Rodriguez, who is Director General of Strategy, Special Projects and International Affairs at MedTech Europe. And I understand MedTech Europe is the industry association for the diagnostics devices and digital health. Did I get that right, sir?
Very much so. Thank you so much, Peter. So thank you for the opportunity to comment on the reflection paper. And like Stephen before me, first of all, I'd like to express our gratitude and our welcoming for the reflection paper itself that has, as intended, triggered a lot of reflections. So that's something that already has been successful. And it's very interesting how the question of AI and AI regulations, adapting AI to use in healthcare is really an issue that comes up across the board in our sector as far as we see it. And it's interesting that the medtech sector is a sector that on its basis is a risk-based sector in its regulatory approach. So we have a very strong tradition of risk-based approach to regulations. And I will echo what was just said by some of my colleagues from pharma. Getting the definitions right is critical going forward. In particular, alignment with other European regulations that do apply to AI is very important, especially the AI Act, because the last thing we would want to find ourselves in a situation where, for instance, the Medicines Agency would consider a certain system an AI system and not the AI Act, or vice versa, which could lead to significant confusion from the market on how to go forward on things. And one of the other things that we've noted is that more than probably any other technology that we've worked for, AI is global, in the sense that you can have AI systems working with and providing data for patients in Europe that not only have been developed elsewhere, but maybe run in other countries and so on. So it's really important to have a strong cooperation globally and internationally on how to handle some of these AI systems. And I'm perfectly aware that different legislators around the world have taken substantially different approaches to AI. But nevertheless, in the healthcare space and in the space that we're discussing here today, it's really important to keep that cooperation going. There was some mention of the OECD guidance. There was some mention of the WHO guidance earlier. All of these are things that, can be considered and looked at. And most importantly, have a voice of the European regulators out there as well. So not just be looking at what we're doing in our own shop, but also sharing our ideas and our concepts, which are actually very good for some of these discussions globally. I would also echo something that was mentioned by patients earlier when it comes to patient management AI systems. So it's one of the things that we find the reflection paper can probably be improved on, is the question of how is AI used in the whole patient journey. Once products are on the market and everything's running, we are starting to see a number of growing support systems for patient management. The example was given of the smart inhalers. There are other examples out there of AI systems used to support patient treatment. This is going to have an impact on how some of these pharmaceutical products are used, their impact, their efficacy, and so on. It would be very interesting to have perhaps a more detailed coverage of that within the reflection paper, and how the Medicines Agency itself sees its role in oversight and regulation of these kinds of applications of AI. Now, we have some specific regulatory concerns on, for example, some of the clinical applications of AI and the clinical study part of things, because we welcome transparency. There's no problem with transparency. And of course, we're happy to submit all the data necessary to the Medicines Agency for the assessment of our AI systems. But as was noted by Gabriel earlier and others, many of these AI systems are actually going to end up being medical devices or IVDs. And one of the things that distinguishes medical devices and IVDs from pharma is that in our sector, there's no data exclusivity. So that is something that we need to consider when it comes to making things available. How can we do that in a way that doesn't compromise further development of AI systems and so on? It is a bit of a challenge, and it is a bit of a cultural difference in a way, but it is something that we do need to take into account, because there are a number of solutions to this, but it's something that needs to be resolved and addressed. We feel that that's quite important going forward. Beyond that, like I said, very happy about the work overall. Just one little question or reflection on the overall risk-based strategy. We noticed that the paper is very good at identifying the risks. And Gabriel went over them in his presentation very extensively, the kind of factors that would increase the risk of an AI system. Coming from a sector that has a risk-based approach, normally we would expect to see all the risks, but also the mitigating factors that you could put together. So there might be a little bit of space to include the kind of mitigating factors that you would be considering when assessing the overall risk of an AI system. That could be something useful as well for reflection, to see what can and cannot be used for mitigation, because perhaps there can actually be substantial differences of opinion as to, well, we think something's mitigating the risk, but maybe you don't. And so there needs to be this sort of reflection and understanding of what can be used for mitigation and to what extent that mitigates certain risks. So that's something that we find important in all of our risk-based discussions with regulators going forward. So, like I said, very happy to see the paper. It has triggered a lot of reflections. We look forward to its further development and further implementation. We have a number of other more detailed technical points which we'll make in writing further on down the line, but thank you for the opportunity to comment, and happy to be here.
Thank you, Jesus. Really interesting perspective. Maybe just a couple of comments, and then I'm going to see if anybody else from your sector would like to intervene, or even from another sector, but through a perspective of medical devices or diagnostics or digital health. The point about international is really important. You'll see before lunch, when we talk about the work plan, the multi-annual work plan, that we foresee significant international collaboration. If we then go back to Elisabetta's presentation yesterday, even if the world sort of horizontal measures on AI are not aligned, medicines regulators are used to collaborating internationally. So we do have an opportunity in our specific domain to perhaps do better than the generalists are doing. So I think we could take that as a challenge that we will try and rise to. Just another observation, your point about the mitigating factors. I would imagine in your industry, you've got lots of examples, maybe without flooding us. If there's one or two key documents that you think are really nicely done, you could maybe share those with us and we could use them for inspiration. Whether it's for the reflection paper or subsequent guidance, it will depend on the level of granularity we go to. But I think it's a nice idea to learn from different sectors. There was a point at the back. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Jess Ross from Unlearn AI. We applaud the EMA for the work that they are doing to facilitate and anticipate the use of AI throughout the medicine's development lifecycle. And we appreciate their willingness to hear from a variety of stakeholders in regards to this reflection paper. Adjacent to Stephen Pike's comment on risk, we have discussed the use of AI models being high risk, but the examples of why AI models could be high risk seem to be related mostly to patient safety, not the potential of AI models within the efficacy space. Particularly, there are contexts of use for AI models, such as in PROCOVA, which the EMA qualified for phase 3 trials in 2022, that do not affect patient safety, dosing, treatment assignment, etc., posing no risks for negative consequences for individual patients, and providing no additional risks to sponsors over typical clinical trials. PROCOVA has been proven to maintain unbiased efficacy assessment with strict control of type 1 error rate. Use of a validated, locked, and reproducible prognostic AI model is pre-specified for a given randomized clinical trial. This is in great contrast to models that continue to learn post-deployment. Broad statements of context of use are not sufficient to assign level of risk. In regards to preventing bias, there seems to be a focus on the demographic characteristics of data used for model training. Although documentation and monitoring of the training data is very important, it does not tell the whole story when it comes to assessing bias. An approach that may provide greater interpretability for regulators is assessing model performance in individual subgroups on external held-out datasets. As fields of research like zero-shot and one-shot learning advance, reliance on specific types of datasets to train generalizable models is already diminishing. Prioritizing robust metrics that can be adaptable over time, such as performance evaluation in the designated context of use, can help the EMA to anticipate the needs of the rapidly advancing AI field. One final question that we would like to highlight for EMA is the idea of prospective testing using newly acquired data. What data is new enough? Has the EMA considered that this perceived benefit comes at a cost of decelerating the use of newer, more powerful models that may have been previously validated? Thank you.
Thanks, very interesting intervention. Just for the sake of clarity, your organisation is linked to the PROCOVA product, or?
Yes, Unlearn AI, yes.
Okay, thank you. Assessing performance on external data sets, that's links quite nicely to the point made by Peter Reinbeck, doesn't it? And maybe it's something that Gabrielle may want to comment on. And also the point on prospective testing on new data and how burdensome that is compared to enabling innovation, again, is an interesting point about balance and feasibility, perhaps also. I don't see any other hands in the room, but maybe Gabrielle, are you there, sir? Because I think some of those points are quite Gabrielle-y, if you, I would say.
Well, yes. Now, I, of course, not speaking about any specific application or product, but rather trying to return to the principles we have based our current version of the discussion with the reflection paper on. I do think that I mean, we fully understand the wish from especially product developers within the clinical trial space to have as rapid pipelines as possible and really leveraging potential benefits into clinical trials at the same time. However, I do want to point out one risk that has been, I think, forgotten in the discussion, and that is that risks are not often just for the sponsors. I mean, patients participating in a trial where it has been under dimensionized due to the use of technology that wrongfully, for example, as promises to increase statistical power but does not de facto deliver, that will actually create risks to patients when they participate in a trial that then cannot be generating sufficient data for further marketing authorization. So there are risks, not only at the sponsor's discretion, also when using technologies that may not affect an individual patient, but may affect the trial as a whole. I do think that the general way of moving forward as quickly as possible is really avoiding pitfalls and failures, and that I don't fully agree with the previous speakers on that we can just proceed and have the sponsors just managing the risk at their own discretion. There is really, I mean, this full landscape is inherently data-driven, and although with the best of meaning, even those that try to stay unbiased may have an academic interest without any commercial interests, often end up in discovering that they have data has leaked into their training, etc. And it can be done in many different ways. Future calendar time, and when we talk about new enough data responding to this question, it's really about that high regulatory impact, for example, late stage clinical trials, where we have an endpoint generated by an AI model, for example, we currently view as needed to be prospectively validated into future calendar time, and anything else is at risk of data leakage. This is our current view. I am sure we will have further time to discuss it, but we see many risks with going elsewhere. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Gabriel, just while you've got the floor, and I was taken, your last intervention reminded me of a comment from Milana. When you say data leakage, I don't think you mean data leakage in terms of data getting into the wrong hands. What do you mean by data leakage?
Yes, I should probably explain that to non-data scientists. When we talk about data leakage, it is that any information about the testing phase is really when you show that an AI model is performing, and that you usually call it validation and other aspects of drug development, but really showing the performance. The problem is that if you are using contemporary data, using a classical train test split, where you have a large data set, you may use 80% to develop your model, and you test it in the remaining 20%. Although that 20% has been kept in a digital vault out of the reach of those developing the model, there may be many statistical reasons why that data is not fully suitable to describe generalizability to a wider context when you use it for new data, what is actually the future. So data leakage is any means where information about the test set leaks into the training environment, causing overfitting of the model and an overestimation of model or system performance. I'll stop there.
Thanks. It makes me think of Harry Potter films, thinking of a digital vault. You know, you can imagine going down into the dungeons. Harry Potter? No.
No. Just and now I'm speaking as part of the methodology working party group working on the reflection paper and having to deal with the comments that will also come in written form, and we are very much looking forward to that. I fully agree to what Gabriel just explained about the prospective nature of potential test data sets, but we might also emphasize that testing with different data sets that are considered independent in some way is of importance. But I wanted to speak to another aspect and connecting to what previous speakers mentioned, and I'm happy to hear expectations from the audience. There were many comments on the interface of medical devices and medicines, and this is a field where the reflection paper is not comprehensive, because this is very complex. And it was mentioned that artificial intelligence models or computer models or software as a medical device will in some way potentially become a medical device in context of patient use. And even if it's intended in the first place to support clinical trials and development only, if we find, for instance, predictive effects, predictive performance in a model that would influence treatment decisions and also decisions to use a specific medicinal product that would likely be handled by the IVDR and as a companion diagnostic. So I feel the need to hear from the audience if the expectation is that we cover this with the reflection paper, and I would say that this would be a difficult task. Thanks.
I like that challenge to the audience. So a specific question. Let's run with this for a few minutes, and then we'll have a coffee break and come back for an open discussion. But Jörg, you've given us given the group a challenge on whether the paper should try and fill that grey zone, if you like, and map more explicitly between medical devices regulation and medicines regulation. Eleanor, you have your hand up, so you better fill that gap for us.
Well, that comment came from me, and it came, I think, indirectly from patients because they were discussing differentially, but the IVDR was coming from us for more than one specialty. It is not per se the expectation of said paper, but the awareness that this needs to be considered, and also regulatory paths, because we're moving towards combination products, and I don't mean drug-device combinations. I mean software pretty much accompanying, in terms of real-world data collection, any administration of any drug. So it's not per se the expectation that within this remit of this particular effort, everything will be addressed. It's very difficult, but there will be some processes or a mechanism to start working on that and building data collection, not for a model, but data collection in terms of potential effects, in terms of potential utilization changes, in terms of regulatory challenges, including with emphasis on the post-approval aspect. Because I think the pre-approval clinical development is better circumscribed, but we're moving towards different types of iterative, not evaluation, but clinical development, continuous, if you like, different types of trials, different types of assessment. So at least this is the answer or the response to the initial comment I made. We don't expect you specifically, but we hope that the agency will look into this. Thanks. Also, particularly because of the extended mandate or expanded mandate, and also because there is a link we did not touch upon today, which is that of preparedness, and then we go into more specific threats for emerging threats and cybersecurity. Thanks.
Thanks, Eleanor. There's a comment right at the back. Introduce yourself, sir.
Hi, my name is Bastian Hornung. I am a methodology assessor for AI at the Medicine Agency of the Netherlands. And I would actually like to comment that we should maybe expand it even more. It has just been last week that one of the university hospitals in the Netherlands has rolled out an AI chatbot for patient advice, including human in the loop. And after some discussion, we actually concluded that at the moment we might not even be responsible for this because it is not a medicine. It is not a device per se, but purely a software. And in how far this actually we should be regulated. I mean, I feel we should be regulating, but are we supposed to be regulating it? And maybe we should. Thank you.
Let's hear from Jesus, and then we'll go to Gabrielle. And do you want to? And please, and then Ina. So, in fact, let's do it in the opposite order. Ina, Jesus, Gabrielle.
Yeah, thank you. No, I think this is an extremely important topic, and I'm very happy that it's raised. And I kind of, coming back to kind of the life cycle approach, I would really like to see that on the life cycle of the medicinal product. I would also like to see the life cycle approach of the model or the AI system considered. And this is where the interlap between kind of software as device or just the software as used within drug development becomes important, but it still have a life cycle. To explicitly sort of go into that and look at it, I think is extremely important because it is so much interlinked for the development of drugs. And I would kind of really like to encourage the reflections on the regulatory side on how you, because this is very much interlinked, on how you can kind of provide that enabling environment that we have been talking about. And I think these aspects are so important into that. And coming back to kind of what are yeah, we're talking about the risk-based approach, but kind of to look at the kind of the enabling environment, we need to go at it at a value-based approach. I think kind of value and risk, there are kind of the two polarities of this, and to hear from the regulators, whether that is not maybe suited into the reflection paper, but as part of the roadmap, it is extremely important to hear from your side where you see the current challenges and where the value is based, and what your role as regulators in that is. It would be nice to see, because it balances this, and it really comes back to kind of specifically the conditions of use, which we heard earlier today, kind of how far to go in the kind of conditions of use on when you introduce the device, but also the information to be used there. So I would really I would like to see these kind of explicit reflections on the regulatory side. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And I think your point about the life cycle of the AI algorithm, one could imagine, and then one could imagine graphics explaining that, as well as the life cycle of a medicine, which everybody's seen 100,000 graphics of that before. But maybe also something graphical to help us describe the interface between medicines and devices, to help the uninitiated navigate that. That's a lovely segue to Jesus. Over to you, sir.
You really get everything ready for me. I appreciate this, Peter. So just a few reflections about some of the questions that have been raised. I do think that there is room for improvement in the current reflection paper on better defining that interface between devices and pharmaceutical applications of AI and other AI systems. But this is an incredibly extensive subject. And I am not quite sure you're going to be able to... Thank you, Milana. So I'm not quite sure we're going to be able to quite effectively cover everything in this one reflection paper if you want to get it out in a timely fashion, because it is going to cover a lot of ground when you start to go into the weeds on this one. So I would perhaps encourage an improvement, and I very much like your graphical representation of the differences between AIs and in medtech and otherwise, and also perhaps having a look at some of the more common applications that we can define in the paper, but it might be something for the follow-up discussion. Because to be honest, even within the medtech space, things are not quite settled yet. So it's not as if you have two well-defined discussions that we need to have a look at the border. You have two kind of somewhat nebulous situations, and you need to start to understand that interface. So I think that that's a discussion that's going to be ongoing over the course of the next few years that will need to have further reflection, but I don't think you're going to have a definitive answer to all the use cases in this one paper. And you know, just to pick up on the example that was given just a moment ago, I'm very surprised that you say that application is not a medical device, because all the applications that I've seen in that same kind of situation, now I'd have to understand exactly the intended purpose, but all of other applications that give advice to patients like this have been CE marked as medical devices. Well, maybe not all of them, but very often they do get CE marked as medical devices. So it's the kind of question that does need to be addressed and needs to be better understood. So there's a common understanding about what we're talking about here. So it's very interesting to see divergence like this that can come up and certain situations.
I think in this case it's important that multiple people have pointed out that we need a common kind of vocabulary, and maybe this is one of the things which needs to go in there.
So listen, a couple of the things you said inspired me. Firstly, we were talking about international collaboration between medicines regulators, but we don't. Well, there's opportunity to further enrich our dialogue with devices regulators in this space, and so I make that as a challenge to KIT, because I like challenging KIT as chair of the Methodology Working Party, to see if we can find some space to talk to the devices regulators going forward. Your point about the reflection paper, of course, the reflection paper is a kind of a starting point, and there's going to be a lot that comes below, and things are moving so quickly that if we try and define absolutely everything and map absolutely everything, we may never get there. Point well taken. Let's go to Gabrielle. Maria-Elaine Pinero, can you mute, please? Go to Gabrielle Westman.
Yes, thank you. Yes. First, starting just with that very specific example on a chatbot giving input to a medical decision, and I think from a Swedish perspective, without precluding anything, I would also expect such an application actually to be classified as a medical device and follow CE conformity assessment. I also would like to sort of comment and pick up on where Jesus passed the ball in terms of the medtech space not being fully settled as of itself, and that we have to see what is currently possible, not getting stuck in what is not currently defined or not even legally decided until it gets to court, really to get something that is constructive and useful in terms of leveraging these technologies to patients. So I think the reasonable expectations from the reflection paper is really to elaborate on the intersection of the medtech and the clinical trials perspectives. And I think one question that I would very much like to see further detailed by Jesus is on the data exclusivity and how that differs from drug development, because as you know from the reflection paper, we see that although you have a conformity assessment to CE mark at the right risk level according to MDR or IVDR, there may be additional requirements needed in terms of supporting the documentation on the system to make it usable within a clinical trial, for example. How do you see that data exclusivity or the lack of such prevents, for example, sharing performance data or development details with regulatory authorities?
Please, Jesus, briefly, and then we're going to go to Martin Posh, and then we're going to have some coffee.
Thank you, Gabriel, for that question. I mean, this is not a new question per se, because we've run into this kind of issue in the co-development, for example, with companion diagnostics as well, because IVDs don't have data exclusivity either. I don't see any problem with sharing the information with the regulator per se, because we understand that the regulator needs to be able to make the full assessment of the systems as such. Our bigger concern is whether or not that data then becomes public as part of the data that's published within the clinical trials information, because that's where the data exclusivity situation becomes critical. Whereas in the pure pharma space, there is data exclusivity, so there is little to no risk of making the data public. In the IVD and medical device space, there is no data exclusivity, so making that data public gives a substantial competitive distortion on the market going further into developing new products. So we don't see any intrinsic issue with sharing data with regulators. That's not the issue. The issue is more about the public sharing of that data, which is in some cases part of what happens for certain data that is included in a clinical study. So that's one of those things that just needs to be sorted out so that the information is provided to the regulators to be able to make the right assessment, but not necessarily made all public, or at least not at a level of granularity that would result in competitive distortions.
Jesus, let's just acknowledge the issue because it's an important issue. We hear from the pharma colleagues also the interplay between transparency measures and dossier submission, things like the raw data pilot that we're running on clinical trials, and we've managed to sort that. But clearly, industry needs to have some certainty about what's going to happen to the data submitted. Listen, my grandmother always said, leave the last word to Martin Posh before coffee. Martin, over to you.
Big responsibility. And I just wanted to follow up to one point Jörg Zinseling made regarding the use of AI tools on the one hand in clinical trials to make trials more efficient. And I think sort of the Procova was one of the examples mentioned here, and also tools sort of that also are then used sort of in the future patient care. And one needs to have to consider if one really can completely separate these tools, because even so tools that are used, for example, to mitigate the risk of dropouts or increase compliance of patients based on AI tools, of course, can be then part of a treatment policy. And so it can make sort of the clinical trial situation even more artificial and make it more difficult then to generalize treatment effects observed in clinical trials into real-world scenarios.
So Kit, Jesper, I think we've had a really rich session. We're not finished, but we are going to have a break. Kit, should we have 15 minutes, come back at 20 past? That wasn't really a question.
No. No, thanks. We enjoy coffee and continue the discussion. Thanks for the discussions we've had so far, which was quite rich, and I'm assuming everybody has returned also in the home or office online setting, and we continue the discussion. What we've done briefly is also look at the questions online and looked at some threads, let's say threads of communication or questions we've seen there. And we will start the discussion by kicking off on a couple of topics, but we are quite open for both the floor and online to intervene and come up with additional points for discussion, and we will pick them up as we go. And in no particular order, to be honest. But one thing that at least we highlighted and was put forward by Stephen Pike is, can we move into a situation where we have more frequent learning, both from a regulatory and industry perspective? You mentioned annual, and as an opening question, so we have some thoughts there, but it would also be interesting to hear. I think learning is also sharing and being transparent. So I would also be interested to know what are the reflections also from the industry side on the level of sharing that's possible to facilitate learning like that. So any reflections there on what we could do to achieve that? Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. So a reflection, it's an observation of the 2 days workshop, which is really fantastic. And a comment from innovative companies. I'm here on behalf of Moderna, of course, but speaking on behalf of innovations and citing what was said by the Commission, provide a legal framework that breakthroughs are first developed in the EU. The observation is really how to build, this is meant for the framework. However, from EMA perspective, to really support innovation and come up with a more nuanced approach in the application of AI in drug development to support really those innovations rather than an approach that is dominated by general prohibitions or restrictions. This is a very general comment, and of course Moderna has provided several more detailed and more granular and subject matter experts' comments, which we will submit in due time. But this is a general observation. And reflecting also what has been discussed so widely, I was really listening carefully on the combination products. AI could be the door opener for a more closer collaboration between the two remits, medical devices and medicinal products, which has been recognized nicely by the expanded mandate. And we're all aware that industry has been for decades strongly advocating for the integrated pathway. We may not reach it now, but the AI element could be fostering this collaboration as an urgent need, linking or bridging the gap between the two different parties with different remits, which we can't resolve because the legal framework is here, but we could use AI as a door opener in this regard. So the core message is really, how can we support innovations without restricting AI in the use of medicinal product drug development?
Yeah, thank you. I see immediately other hands raised as well. Stephen.
Thank you. Just specifically on this topic, one of the things that we've heard this morning and indeed yesterday is how broad the topic of AI is. And the more you think and look at it, the more connections you've seen between what you've sort of initially rather naively think of, this is what AI is, and actually it sort of almost dissolves into other areas and the boundary is very unclear. But what I would suggest as a way forward here might be, in terms of sharing learnings and learning lessons, is to pick specific topics. And for instance would be, well, a workshop on training AI algorithms and understanding that in itself is already broad, but at least it starts to bring a bit of focus and starts to give us a sense of well, we can dig deep here. We can talk about data. We can talk about the different sources and the merits and demerits of some of those. But I think topic-led rather than broad AI discussions might be most helpful.
Yeah, I think that's actually a good suggestion, and also opens the door, I think, in my view, fairly easy to share. Yeah.
Just in front of the little screen is a button, and that'll bring your mic on.
Now I see it, sorry. Hanny de Munnik from AstraZeneca. We are very open in answer to your question on sharing and learning together. It's very fast moving, and I think a year is really not frequent enough, actually. So if the frequency can be more often, it's really appreciated, because we have to learn, and we have to learn fast.
Yeah, also this point is well taken. I think in combination with the suggestion that Stephen marked to make it topic oriented, it's probably also manageable to do so. Thomas.
Thanks, Kit. Yeah, Tom Brook from Roche. Yeah, like AstraZeneca, I'd say we're very open to sharing and co-learning. And I think in line with some of the things I said yesterday, that the use cases are going to become more and more important, because we need to go from a sort of sometimes more theoretical high level to more concrete use cases where you can really discuss and debate and challenge the what specific requirements, meaningful requirements, could look like. And of course, there's different ways of doing that. In confidence, there are scientific advices. There's Jörg outlined them nicely yesterday. Even the concept of a portfolio type meetings with a lens on AI, for example. But of course, they're not open. But what about a future workshop focused on reviewing, analyzing different types of use cases, maybe clustering types of use cases together and going through them in an anonymized way, of course, but with a sufficient level of detail that provides some sort of meaningful debate and discussion? Because I know I harp on a bit about this use case thing, but I think it's really critical that we do get to some of the more mature use cases, if you like. So that's one example of another workshop like this that could be good.
I think it's a suggestion really appreciated, and I kind of like the combination of use cases, but also have it topic based. So don't spread the discussion too broad. And in my view, it kind of also will enable the comment made earlier on: are we stimulating innovation enough? I think across all stakeholders, we need to trust what's happening in AI, because quite substantial decisions are taken throughout the entire life cycle of models. So actually, it will help us both, I think, from both ends, to have this exchange and learning there in both directions. As a forward warning, I think actually some of these ideas are on the work plan, so we will be able to discuss it briefly later on this morning as well. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Akilis Voutsas. I'm from the EMA's IT department. One aspect that maybe has not been covered, and I think it's important also for industry and for regulators, is the aspect of enterprise IT. So you have solutions that then being deployed in organizations, and they need to comply with the regulator, with the compliance aspects of AI. And an important topic for us would be also the evaluation of models or solutions in general using AI, and how we could establish a common baseline on this. And maybe for us, it would be really important the engagement with academia, considering that the need for, let's say, more knowledge on this topic, which is quite new, would be really beneficial for us.
I think there are very good suggestions to take upon. I see that also, and I will do want to give him some opportunity on the floor, that Gabriel's hands raised. So Gabriel, floor to your reflections.
Yes, perhaps moving back discussion to sharing and reaching over bridges here. And I think what I really see as one of the most hypothetically productive and fruitful futures would be really to create some sort of system for sharing on a horizontal level among developers, models that can, I mean, we see many examples in data science space now in terms of Hugging Face, other communities where model development and quality is really driven on a community-based level. And when we do see interactions, may it be not so much in qualification, but in scientific advice, we see that still that there's a very proprietary view on this, that you build something that you want to keep for yourself and use it to your benefit. And as we are discussing how to make meetings between regulators and industry, I would also want to raise the question back to industry, whether you see a future where you are sharing these kinds of tools, technologies, models, and algorithms with each other, because that would, of course, make our life much more easier in seeing that things are working not only in the hands of one sponsor, but in several, and that could effectively shorten the development pipelines and path to approval. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Gabriel, and also bringing up that sharing perspective across the stakeholders. Also there, I think it would be interesting to also hear responses, ideas from the different stakeholders here on an approach that Gabriel is outlining here.
No, I realize this is quite some forward-thinking idea, but I think that especially in industry association, I think there should be a discussion on whether this kind of common platforms can be established, and whether not locking in innovation, but rather sharing innovation could really unlock the potential that you have in other parts of your development, where you may be it's more core part of the industry. Because I think standardization, not only of terms, of taxonomy, of regulatory wording, of principles, but also on what actual deployment cases and use cases. I mean, looking at what's possible and what's positive, and not only focusing on what's problematic. Because in technologies as complex as this, you will always find a use case where legislation is contradictive, or where guidance is not supporting enough. But really looking at positive examples, what works, what can be done, and also then including what can be shared. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thanks, Gabriel. I give the floor to Jesper for further.
Yeah, I just
reflection.
recently had the experience to attend the FUSE meeting in Birmingham with a lot of statistical programmers and statisticians coming together. And the overarching theme there was really the sharing of statistical scripts between companies in open source repositories. Now, I think followed this space for a while, and also some of the other initiatives that is looking at building common digital data flows, agree on data standards and protocols, what else not at all machine readable. You're already there in the space, right? So, I mean, really encouraged to step forward and look at what AI can play in terms of our role in those flows, right? So, and share that. We welcome that.
Yeah. Thanks, Jesper. Jess, please.
Thank you. I think that is a great point, but I do want to also point out the idea of AI accountability, and if the model were to be used by other companies freely, who would be responsible for it if it fails? I just want to bring that up as a situation that should be thought about in terms of sharing models. Thank you.
I think it's an interesting point. There was a comment yesterday about the fact that often the developer of the software is not necessarily the person using the software, and so companies will be buying in solutions and so on. So this concept of the accountability is going to be an important point, and maybe it's something that should be addressed in the reflection paper. Just maybe to broaden this question about collaboration and sharing, because we threw the question at you, and maybe people haven't got positions that they can share, but it does seem that sort of, I'm going to use the word in the loosest sense, but platforms, approaches, technologies is an area where collaboration between both public and private, but also public and public, and private could be helpful. I don't know, you think of CPATH, you think of IHE, you think of Transcelerate, you think of, yes? I just wonder whether we should think about fostering those kind of collaborations. I don't know if there's any comment.
Okay, yeah. Thanks, Peter. First Jörg and then Stephen.
Yeah, I have a very short comment. As Peter mentioned, critical path. From the qualification opinion perspective, they were the most successful bringing tools to the public use. And this is then not only sharing scripts and statistical models, but also sharing data. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Jörg, for the addition. Stephen, please, and then I will move to there.
Thank you. I just really to respond to Peter's suggestion. I mean, my view would be that over time we've learned where the boundaries of what is competitive and what is not competitive stand, and they've moved. We've become less resistant to sharing, and that's a good thing. In the end, we all exist to serve patients. And so the more we can create forum, platforms, spaces where we can come together and share that which is utterly shareable, and I feel there is still much beyond what we currently share where that is possible, is a good thing. The point, though, I wanted to make here is that in order for these things to happen, someone needs to act as the broker to bring it to life. And we talk about organizations like Transcelerate, but there are many others. But in order to drive this sort of sharing, someone has to create the space, an honest broker again, a word I used yesterday, to really bring it to life. Without that, we go much more slowly.
Thanks. Point well taken, Stephen. And then,
Yeah, thank you, in here. No, I just wanted to leave the aspect of kind of the context of use into that sharing, because sharing of models, but also kind of sharing the specific applications when we go from, the model or the system to how it's specifically used in the context of use. This is what we've been discussing a lot yesterday also. How does it look then? What are the risks and what how do we do that evaluation? And this is where we need to learn from the successes and the failures. So kind of to have the context of use as a topic for shared learning, I think is important.
Thanks, and it's one way or other way of putting it is indeed share use cases in a particular context of use to learn from. Yeah, we have hands there. I think AstraZeneca there, and then we have a couple of hands there. So we move to the left side in a minute.
Yeah. Okay, I wasn't sure where you wanted to start, so thank you. It's a good for sharing. We can share the thinking of how we do it. I think we are very open to do that. But for tuning the foundation model, especially with using large learning language models, we will need a lot of proprietary data, and that could be a hurdle. Yeah, and one more thing, if it's about sharing on data standards, data collaborations, or vocabularies, it's absolutely fine sharing. Yep.
Yeah, a good point raised, and certainly on the data aspect. Yeah, thank you.
There's a lady in the back.
Yeah.
Who hasn't spoken yet.
I am Julia Lischke from Ligature. We're a non-for-profit organization that is fostering public-private partnerships. Some of you know us. We are looking, obviously, we have a lot of projects that we're supporting in the range of AI application, in infrastructure, but as well as in drug discovery and development. And additionally to what all has been mentioned is that we're looking a lot into literacy, like that we are fostering also that the partners that are reusing the AI applications from other groups, that they actually know the limitations, the dangers, and so on and so forth. So anytime that we're moving in this partnership space, we need to make sure that we train people to actually be able to responsibly use the AI that we're developing. This is very general, I think, a topic that we need to take into consideration if we're talking about AI use, the literacy of people that didn't develop the algorithms, additionally towards the accountability.
Yeah, I think indeed you raise a very important point to make sure indeed that's essentially the training and making sure that everybody who is engaged is also knowledgeable enough to do so. Thomas, please.
Yeah, thanks. Just to add to this, my Roche colleague Ord is making what I think is quite a good point here. As a potential framework or example is the DEEP pilot with the EMA, the digital endpoint pilot. Maybe that could be an example of a framework or a template to follow here, maybe.
Yeah, thanks. Good suggestion, and we are checking how well we are informed on that part, actually, but I think we will follow up. Gabriel, please.
Yes, very happy to hear the discussion. And I think, I mean, looking at the potential here, I mean, we see several developers really keen on using third-party models from other providers, and I'm sure then we can find a common ground to use third-party models, but from fellow drug developers in the same domain. And I think that the EMA qualification procedure is an excellent process in verifying that the context of use and the technology is sufficiently robust to be used also by other users, because I mean that is how we see those developing AI per se and having that at their business model, that they go for qualification and then use that qualification to show to drug developers that their tool is safe for use. And we see it in bioassays. And so I think when we start thinking about this, I mean the question that has come up, which is to be resolved, is of course on data protection. And I hear actually we have many promises in terms of anonymization, about synthetic data, and about really transforming what could be from the European health data space, but also of course on a global level, use of data, turning it into a model which can be shared without any privacy concerns. Of course, this will require investment and development and learnings and regulatory interactions, but I strongly believe this is the road we should move ahead for more effective medicines development, which will really benefit everyone in the end. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Gabriel. Looking around, was there anything to add to this topic? Maybe kind of deep in the topic a bit. One of the other things mentioned earlier was benchmarking of models, which goes, I think, beyond sharing and learning. That would actually be a higher level. And just as a trigger to one of the things I know fairly closely in benchmarking of more complex models is the grand challenge, which is in the imaging radiology world globally, where algorithms are put to the test for a fairly general large group, and we are aware that also fellow regulatory agencies are participating in such a challenge. But that's another level of learning and another level of sharing. And here it would be, I think, both interesting from an industry perspective, but also indeed from companies that are developing algorithms or methods. Would that be a road to move or to extend to in sharing and learning? Actually benchmarking models jointly. Yes, Bastiaan.
So not from industry perspective, but maybe this is exactly something which we as regulators should be doing, that we give benchmarks to companies saying, can you manage at least a threshold of X% accuracy for your models? And that we drive in this way the development of more and better AI.
Okay, thanks. Yes, Jesus.
It's one of those yes but answers. So I do think that benchmarking is always very useful, and I appreciate the example you gave on imaging systems and the benchmarking of AI in imaging systems. We use it as well a lot in microscopy and digital pathology. I think that there is definitely value in benchmarking the performance and the output of different AI systems, but there needs to be a recognition that not all AI applications are equal or are going to be able to achieve the same kind of performance. So a bit of, awareness and understanding that not everything is comparable, and you need to really define well what it is that you're benchmarking against to see if it's really relevant. We've had a lot of experience in this in the IVD space, where some diagnostic tools can reach very high performance levels, and so you can benchmark against very high performance, others not so much. And I think that that's also the situation right now with AI systems. So you need to have some clear guidelines on what you can compare and what is not really comparable going forward on, if you're looking at performance benchmarks, which is, I think, that what we're talking about here.
But point well taken. So it's benchmarking against what exactly might be very use case and context of use, but also maybe even approach dependent. Gabriel, I think you have a reflection there as well.
Yes, I think there needs to be quite a bit of thought into if even considering creating some sort of standardized benchmark for models, because what we see in this technology space, I mean, we see benchmark-driven development really in that you get overfitting to the actual benchmark. I mean, we see these reduced size distilled large language models that perform very well on benchmarks, but where the differences in real world performance may differ. So similar to when you measure something, you will get development that only aims at fulfilling those measurements, perhaps sacrificing general performance. So I think this could be also something that we need to have legal considerations on if it is to somehow affect the free flow of products within the European Union certified as medical devices, for example. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Gabriel. Yes, Stephen, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to broaden the discussion a little bit around benchmarks into the sort of provision of evidence as a basis for regulatory decision making. And one of the things that I was just reflecting on was this sort of notion of human in the loop, human oversight, what we mean by it, and what works in practice. And so we have this idea that the human is the final guarantor of the sort of reliability of what's presented in a regulatory context, and indeed more broadly, of course. What's less clear to me is how effective oversight is in the various application areas in which it is AI is deployed. And I think, so we have this presumption that it's at least as effective as any other currently available. I wonder whether there's certain application areas where human oversight reduces, or indeed is better than current standards. And the fact of the matter is, I don't think there's a huge amount of evidence as yet. So just sort of thinking about how we create and share publications, of course, will emerge, but use it to underpin regulatory thought in this area it seemed to me an important topic too.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. I think we share that we don't know the answer, actually, how effective human oversight is, but we do rely on it. So I think this is indeed a relevant topic to pursue. Maybe, yeah?
I have a comment on the benchmarking. I think so. A lot of public competitions like Kaggle, Grand Challenges. So I think they're benchmarking the model itself, but in reality, any kind of AI-driven kind of endpoint or kind of medical device is a system, right? It composed from the pre-processing, maybe some pre-model to do the filtering the data, and then is the actual model doing the prediction, and then the post-processing. I think it's the key that we can measure the whole system rather than the individual model. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. Point well taken. Martin.
Yeah, I mean, I would also support what has been said regarding the benchmarking, that this cannot replace sort of a prospective validation of algorithms. And actually, when we think about a prospective independent validation, it's probably not only important that this sort of the data comes sort of from a prospective trial, but also that it's really independent. We're also thinking about so to increase external validation, have, for example, different centers or countries involved to make sure that it's actually generalizable.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. Actually, that perspective also links to some of, we got quite a few questions on continuous development of models versus indeed the requirement to have prospective testing on a well-defined model or system or approach there. I'm not sure, Gabriel, do you want to expand a bit on that? Because there are parts of that in the reflection paper.
Yes, I mean, of course, we acknowledge that incremental learning is a concept that is widely used within artificial intelligence, meaning that the model is continuously adapting to new data. However, this is obviously in contrast to how we do hypothesis testing, and opens up, if allowed freely, for really having the investigator or steering interpretation of the data in a desired way, which is of course probably or likely not acceptable by regulators. So the question is how to identify areas where incremental approaches or somehow model change may still be needed, although in a high-risk regulatory setting. And this is, I think, still open for discussion on whether this is possible. I mean, I mentioned briefly the discussion on safe learning spaces, which is sort of a parallel to the design space, which we use in manufacturing, that allowing some sort of dimensions where things may be adapted according to pre-specified rules, but whether that will be accepted, I think, is a matter of academic development. As to my general experience, I must, however, say that those that most strongly advocate for the need for the model continuously changed perhaps hasn't done their feature engineering or model development as thoroughly as those that are faithful in that their models will last the test of time, at least over the span of a clinical trial. Because, I mean, most trials do although they span over years, it's not over decades, and also in very controlled data environments, not as prone to secular trends as we see in other data flows in other sectors. So I'm not sure whether this is such a big problem as the number of questions are currently suggesting, but I think we need to keep the discussion open, both showing how good machine learning can be done and locking the model, and how we can allow change, perhaps as an amendment to the statistical analysis plan. And then you need to have some sort of pre-specification on how that change should be done. I mean, we allow changes in clinical trials, also in phase 3 trials, but that kind of change in the regulatory principles behind allowing change then needs to be adapted for AI and machine learning stuff. Thank you.
Thanks, Gabriel. And on this topic, and I think you kind of indeed link to control change, if you like, that we do allow and plan for also in clinical trials. And I think we've benefited quite a bit of being able to do so. Maybe here it's also interesting to hear the more academic perspective where part of the development takes place. And maybe also share experiences where we are already moving towards a controlled deployment and development of models over the life cycle. So I think actually that's what we are looking at here. Any ideas, suggestions, practices that we not surfaced yet? Kind of, let's say that lack of immediate response also kind of reiterates for me with a cautious approach. But Ine.
No, I can come back to the kind of context of use and what the regulatory needs are, kind of what are, because this is kind of what method is useful and how can it be sort of evaluated and qualified for that use. And I think clarity on the regulatory side on what the needs are and kind of what are the questions that needs to be answered to establish the benefit risk, the cost benefit, the conditions of use, because we use a huge range of methods and some of them we need to kind of step out and we need to prospectively define and get new data to confirm. We need to randomize, but other times we can use other methods and we can learn and we can inform the times we step out. So I think kind of to foster the innovation and the development of methods and get methods to a level where they really can inform regulatory decision making, we need clarity on the other end. What are the questions that needs to be answered? What are kind of the regulatory concerns and questions? So I think it's kind of this going back and forth and having real clarity on the needs for the specific context of use is kind of helping academia, but also industries.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Maybe also briefly back to Gabriel, because I think some of this was intended to be part of the reflection paper. We're possibly not entirely there yet. But I think also the current reflection paper does make a distinction on context of use and regulatory needs. Any comments from you, Gabriel?
Yes. I mean, these are difficult, perhaps even impossible questions to answer if answered only from a single aspect. I mean, we are accustomed to managing and assessing uncertainty, and of course it is the combinations and the effects and the importance and impact of those uncertainties, the totality really of a comprehensive assessment. That, I mean, if you do have a fantastic effect size, I mean, we know that, I mean, historical controls, although they are limited in many ways, they are acceptable, because if no one was really cured before and everyone's cured now, we don't need a control arm. I mean, and in some senses also several sort of very high-risk use cases of AI will be acceptable because of the setting that they are used in provides assurance in other means. So it's really about building the full chain of credibility and trust, where we see where uncertainty multiplies, where it mitigates each other, and in building a case that can finally be accepted for regulatory approval. So it is very hard to say when is AI good enough. I mean, I get that question also from the healthcare sector, and then I usually use that parallel that okay, when is allogenic stem cell transplant good enough? Well, we know that if it's done in a tertiary clinical setting where you have the competence and everything to mitigate risks and so on, we know that the benefit-risk balance is positive. If you use it in a primary healthcare setting, it's a very bad idea. And it's very similar to applications of AI. You might have high risk, high volatile models that perform well in a study setting where they are really controlled intensively. So giving a specific answer on where the threshold lies is almost impossible. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And on that, let's say, that's an interesting metaphor you're pulling. I think we're going to wrap up for this session, although we are quite clearly not finished with our discussion. I think one highlight, at least for me, is the shared willingness and also ideas that we have on sharing and learning experience as quickly as possible to move in this complicated field, which is actually summarized by Gabriel as well. So I think you can expect follow-up also from our regulatory end in that respect. So and many thanks to first of all Gabriel for presenting and answering the discussion from the regulatory side, but also all the contributions from the room to the discussion. I think it's truly enriching, and we're clearly not there. So we're also very much looking forward to further comments that we will receive on the reflection paper, and rest assured that we will address them quite meticulously. So thanks.
Yeah, so thanks, Kit. I thought it was really a very engaging international cooperation between medicines and devices, shared learnings, clarity on definitions, and maybe future-proof them with legislation like the AI Act that's coming. Regulator as enabler of innovation rather than risk-averse blocker. Proportionality wasn't a word that came up much, but it was a sub-theme of much of what was said, I think. And I would say we've been listening very carefully to this discussion, and we would ask those of you who are motivated to put comments in writing before the 31st of December, so that reflection paper can be as good as it can possibly do. It will then be the springboard upon which further guidance is later developed. That's the end of that session, but hold on tight. We're on the home straight, as they say. We're going to go into our last, we're going to broaden out and look at a multi-annual work plan. And this is your chance to influence the regulator's work plan for the next couple of years. There will be future chances as well, but this is going to be your key initial chance. And a great pleasure to introduce our two moderators, Hilma Hamann, who is Head of Information Management Division, Hilma on my left here, and Jörg Zinserling, you already know from yesterday, Senior Statistician from the BfArM, member of the Methodology Working Party Big Data Steering Group. So please, you're not Kit, so we'll find you a new name badge, sir, called M for Moderator, and I hand over to you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Peter. I will very briefly introduce this last session, and Peter already mentioned the purpose. We are going to present some ambitious plan for the future, and the aim is to get some initial feedback from the whole audience, but maybe also specifically from the panelists that were expressing views from the different stakeholder sides. So we will closely monitor who's going to raise hands and wanting to speak. And without further ado, I will introduce the speaker of this session, who will introduce the AI roadmap. And it's my pleasure to introduce Luis Pinheiro, an epidemiologist and data scientist working at the Data Analytics Task Force at EMA. He's been co-chairing the AI technical group at EMA. and was also part of the drafting group for the AI reflection paper. And he's extensive work experience at EMA for 13 years and was at the Portuguese National Competent Authority before. And with that, the floor is yours, Luis.
So thank you very much. I will use the mouse, so I'll be sitting here for now. And I would like to introduce you to what comes next. And the first thing I'd like to say about what comes next is that it is still a draft. We have some way to go until we finalize the document. It has been informed by internal discussions, several rounds of internal discussions, and it will be also informed by today's discussion. The other thing I should say is that this should be read in context of the big data steering group's work plan. So you'll see there's items here that actually link back quite nicely to the remaining BDSG work plan. So I'll control from here. Valerie is the work plan presentation, thanks. So while we do that, there's the next slide is an introduction slide. It's a content slide, and there's a one introduction. There's one slide of introduction, and there's one slide with the helicopter view of the work plan. So we see the 4 swim lanes that you'll see in a minute, and then there's 4 slides of detailed topic descriptions. And what I'll do is I will present briefly the helicopter view in the slide with the swim lanes, and then I'll move on to discuss the details in the details slides. Okay, so I've walked through this slide, so we can get the next slide, please, and the next one. Okay, so sorry, the next one, the previous one. Okay, so this is the introduction of the work plan. And we start by acknowledging that the artificial intelligence systems are gradually becoming a dominant tool supporting intellectual work across all walks of life and powering automation. There is a vision from the European Medicines Regulatory Network, and that is for a regulatory system that harnesses the capabilities of artificial intelligence for personal productivity, process automation, systems efficiency, and increased insights into healthcare data for stronger decision support mechanisms and to extract benefits for public health. So the vision is a positive outlook because it is guided by a drive for responsible and trustworthy AI. We also note the increasingly sophisticated nature and pace of change of AI, and that it brings opportunities but also brings challenges. The application of AI requires a collaborative, coordinated strategy to maximize the benefits we can extract from artificial intelligence, while ensuring that the uncertainty is adequately explored and risks are monitored and mitigated. Now, this first version of the BDSG multi-annual work plan focuses on 4 critical dimensions, which I'll explain in a minute, and those are meant to facilitate the development and use of responsible and beneficial artificial intelligence. Now, we also note that the technology is fast evolving, and there are technical and policy aspects related to it that evolve as well. So as these change, the plan will be regularly updated. So it might be that in maybe half a year, we need to have a new version to account for developments in the field. Can we move to the next slide, please? And the next one. So this is the helicopter view. I know that eyes are going to be screening and cameras are going to be flashing. I will walk you through the main issues here. There will be opportunity to discuss these swim lanes in detail. The first thing that we need to acknowledge in this slide is that there are 4 interlinked lanes. This is obviously a draft. There's a big gray draft letter there, so I do get that in the picture as well. There are 4 interlinked lanes, training and collaboration and experimentation, support guidance, Tools support experimentation, and policy support the other swim lanes. So these 4 swim lanes: guidance, policy and product support, tools and technology, training and collaboration, and experimentation, they are interlinked. We had a long discussion yesterday. One of the key questions was what is needed for AI, and the topic of data came quite often in the replies of colleagues. And you will not see a data lane here because that is addressed elsewhere in the Big Data Steering Group work plan. Data quality is crucial for a number of things, not just AI, but it's a fundamental aspect that's already in the Big Data Steering Group's work plan. You will also see a lot of lines, so maybe this is not the type of plot that you typically associate with work plans. There's a lot of lines, and that reflects the dynamic nature of artificial intelligence. And then you see at the bottom cycles of experimentation, and that just illustrates the need for having iterations of experimenting and learning. If I can go to the next slide. Next one. So there's 4 slides with the same layout, and I will focus on the left-hand side here, which is the text, and there are key dates on the right-hand side. I will not detail those enumerate those sequentially, but I will mention them in the text. So the first slide is on guidance, policy, and product support. And obviously, there will be continued support to the development and evaluation of AI in medicine's life cycle. We've heard from Jörg yesterday what we've received as a regulatory network, and we will continue to provide that support. With the public consultation of the reflection paper, which we are currently doing, the process of exploring the development of guidance has initiated. So one of the things that we need to understand is whether we need multiple guidelines. So we've had discussions on different specificities, different characteristics of AI models according to the areas of healthcare that they touch. And we've talked about being topic specific. So obviously there is going to be a discussion on whether we need multiple guidelines. And I think Gabriel has mentioned 2 potential different guidelines in the methodology working party work plan. And this process will continue to be led by the CHMP methodology working party. Now, large language models will become easily accessible. Actually, we should say they are easily accessible currently, and thus there will be guidance across the European Medicines Regulatory Network on the use of large language models. And those are critical because we do need to ensure that the use of these models is sound ethically and legally across the network. From mid-2024, work will be initiated in preparation of the AI Act coming into force. And the use of AI will require constant monitoring, both of the impact of AI as well as of the emergence of novel systems and technologies, and thus an observatory will be created. And finally, the possibility, we discussed the sandboxes yesterday, the possibility of developing a regulatory sandbox for AI will be considered. We are having several discussions today and yesterday on the importance of terminology, and that will be done in the context of the follow-up activities of the reflection paper. So the precursor of the reflection paper will take on the responsibility of looking at terminology. Next slide, please. In terms of tools and technology, I think it's first and foremost, we've discussed GDPR at length. It's first and foremost important to point out that full compliance with data protection legislation will be ensured. We want to leverage the advances in natural language processing. Obviously, EMA generates a lot of documentation. The network generates a lot of documentation. We use a lot of documentation. And developments in natural language processing allow us to be potentially better at managing that information. So we have a plan for a knowledge mining and communication support roadmap to be developed and implemented. Large language models, are, and particularly chatbots, are likely to become a dominant tool in intellectual work as personal assistants. So we will phase the implementation of those and monitor to ensure that the benefits of the implementation are maximized, in particular for office productivity. We will also survey the network on capability to analyze data, including the use of artificial intelligence, and the survey will inform on efforts to enhance the analytics capability of the network. To foster collaboration, integration, and reusability of tools and models, a network tools policy for open and collaborative AI development will be published. Next slide, please. So in terms of training and collaboration, we had several discussions before the coffee break on collaboration. I think some of the issues we've put here, some of the activities we put on the work plan may address the issues raised by colleagues. So in terms of training and collaboration, we acknowledge the fast-paced progression of AI, and that requires continuous collaboration and training. We will continue to collaborate to work with partners on artificial intelligence, including ICMA, which you heard yesterday, and other European Union agencies as part of an AI virtual community, including EFSA and ECDC, which were also discussed yesterday in the presentation on building communities. The European Specialized Expert Community of the EMA Methodology Working Party, you heard about it yesterday. Probably for some of you that will be new. It will establish a special interest area on AI and will provide a network community of practice and a forum for collaborating and knowledge sharing. The EU Network Training Center will provide a framework and a platform to expand digital academy offerings on AI and data analytics, as well as support the development and delivery of the Big Data Steering Group data science curriculum. There will be a working model to allow collaborative development and evaluation of AI applications. And we've had a discussion around the potential benefit of having data science challenges, the need to have focused discussions. So there's plenty, when we go back to the slide, you'll see that there's plenty of public workshops. There are masterclasses and there's maybe CodeFest and hackathons that will help upskill staff and connect to the data science community at large. Next slide, please. So, and finally, experimentation. Experimentation is key. It is key to expedite learning and reduce uncertainty about a technology or a system. And we've planned for experimentation cycles of up to 6 months to be conducted throughout the next few years. To do that, we will draft internal guiding principles for responsible AI. As I mentioned, responsible AI is critical for our positive outlook of artificial intelligence, and those guiding principles will be developed by the ESEC. Once the principles and a framework of experimentation are consolidated, then a roadmap of network research priorities will be defined, and experimentation cycles will align with those priorities. And finally, we talked about AI being too much. It's too much to take on in a single sort of, it's not an amuse-bouche type of work. We need to split things down. So there will be technical deep dives looking in detail at specific tools and technology. So the suggestion that was made to sort of chunk down the topics is well taken, and we actually are planning to do that exact thing and sort of focus on specific technologies and techniques. And that will help guide experimentation. And I think that will be my last slide, Valerie, and we can go back to the swim lane if you could walk us back to that slide.
Maybe thanks, Luis, for this presentation. And before handing over to my co-moderator, who will probably also introduce himself, I can say that we also monitor the chat for potential questions on the work plan, and will try to have questions from the audience and also from the chat answered by knowledgeable colleagues that worked on this plan. Thanks.
Thank you, Jörg. And I think Peter already introduced me, so we can skip that step. So first of all, Luis, thank you so much. It's quite impressive of how you've been able to bring all these different aspects together on a page, and being brave enough to say, well, this is the next 4 years, and we all know things evolve so fast that obviously there will be iterations of the plan. I just had one question about the experimentation lane, because you also mentioned as these AI capabilities become so much more mainstream and they're baked into the standard software technologies. How do you see us actually moving beyond experimentation more towards adoption at really the enterprise level?
Well, thanks, Ilma. I think I think I know where your question comes from. So what we're seeing currently is that there's hardly any software system that you use that doesn't have an AI component. So if you, maybe in the beginning of the year, Microsoft, all their software, and probably every single person in this room, and unless you're only a machine learning engineer, you will be using some Microsoft products, and there will be Copilot embedded into it. And we see layers of contribution of AI in terms of sort of the decision-making process, the sort of the work of people on a daily basis, and that sort of enterprise level products, I see those as personal productivity assistants, right? So you still have a responsibility when you're using. You still have a responsibility. Slightly different when you're talking about building a system, and I think was it a colleague, Benjamin Hughes from IQVIA, that talked about models and systems are different, right? So we need to bear in mind that we are all going to use more AI more often, but there's some things that have key influence in systems, and other things are just helping you on a daily basis. Thanks.
Thank you. That's very helpful. So maybe we'll take a look into the audience to see if there's any burning question. Tom, please.
Sorry, thanks. Yeah, firstly, a super plan to see such a advanced, I know you said it was a draft, Luis, but an advanced multi-year plan. I think this does sort of add to the comments yesterday that Europe is certainly at the forefront of AI policy. So super to see this. Maybe three things that just jumped to my mind, and I'm sure others have got other thoughts here. Under the guidance policy and product support, you put there, where is it? Preparing for the AI Act coming into force. Could you elaborate on what you mean by that, or what does that actually mean? Is that monitoring? Is that, do you see an impact? So that was the first one. Second one briefly was under the collaboration piece, the fact that the US FDA released a discussion paper on AI in drug development relatively recently as well has come up, and just wondered about collaboration with the US FDA on this topic. And lastly, a question on clinical trial applications, and I'm not sure it fits here, but it's been noted that, of course, AI and machine learning approaches used in clinical trials, you could argue the first point of review of those would be at the national level, at the national competent authority level. Just wondered about any thoughts on that. I know that I think IFA in Italy had released a few years ago some sort of guidance on the use of AI in clinical trials, and so I don't know if that fits on here, but just interested in any thoughts, reflections you have on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Thelma. I think I'll take the last two, and I'll pass to Peter, because the AI Act is sort of rather wider topic. But the first question you had on the FDA, yes, we do collaborate with them. It's not necessarily on this slide deck, but it was on the slide deck that Pierpaolo presented yesterday, that we have a collaboration with FDA. We tend to present we're starting to present our plans together. We're certainly looking to some degree of alignment, obviously. So we do collaborate with FDA. In terms of the clinical trial applications and guidance or guidelines coming from those, one would expect that would be a process of sort of digesting the reflection paper and moving on to the development of guidance in the medicine's life cycle within the MWP. I'm not sure that you were talking about a specific topic, but if it's just sort of guideline development, then it would be in that swim lane. Thanks. And I'll pass to Peter for the
Yeah, maybe just to complement. So in terms of the AI Act, we haven't yet done a detailed impact assessment. And as we get nearer to adoption, that needs to progress. But one would envisage that we need to check our guidelines, policies and processes to make sure that they're fully in line with new legislation. So it's at this stage, it's as high level as that, if you like, but it needs to be, it's a piece of work that has to be done. And we wanted to make that public commitment, which is why we put it into the work plan. The FDA, just a comment on FDA. I mean, FDA is a big beast, and they do devices as well as medicines, as well as etc., tobacco and food and whatever. So when we talk about collaboration with FDA, we need to be precise, if you like. And so I guess we're talking about medicines and biologics collaboration and the use of artificial intelligence. And I think it was a theme that came out of the previous discussion, that where we can converge with sector-specific rules on AI or principles or whatever we come up with, that we should do that. And I think we are making a commitment, and it could well be that a forum, which is not FDA-specific, but like ICMA, would bring additional regulators on board and might be more appropriate, actually. And that doesn't preclude some specific deep dives on specific topics with one or two individual regulators. And I just wanted to join some dots on the clinical trials. So starting tomorrow, Kit, I think you might be chairing or co-chairing. We have the ACT-EU multi-stakeholder workshop on clinical trials methodologies. And I would see that methodologies development for clinical trials, as well as the work on convergence of clinical trial approval and scientific advice, is a specific priority action under accelerating clinical trials in the EU initiative. Hopefully that would fill the gap that you're highlighting, that things are not then just being totally overseen member state by member state. And particularly if it's technology or an application that may be reused, that you could see significant advantage of elevating that to European level.
Okay, thank you. Digital twin.
Thank you.
All right, so I think we have questions online. Oh, there's a Maren, please.
Yeah, may I just following the ACT AI. It's a tricky one. And we are wondering, I mean, this is a European law as far as we understand, and it's not sector specific. So just, you may be super aware of, but just to mention again here, that the medicinal sector is quite specific and that AI rules in other sectors do not interfere or hinder our innovative approach in AI.
Thank you for that comment. There's more questions. Panos, please.
Thank you. Panos Sintis. I am a consultant and also a member of the CIOM's AI group in pharmacovigilance. This is very encouraging to me that we have a work plan already. And it's probably a slightly premature question because you haven't covered individual areas, but I just want to encourage regarding pharmacovigilance, because the discussions we are having already at CIOMS is making it very clear that many companies are already using extensively the AI system to collect or process safety data, and some of this data is coming here to Eudravigilance, and it involves quite often products that are already on the market and being used widely. So there is a possibility there of impact on patient safety, public health. And would you then consider pharmacovigilance as a specific early topic, I would say, also bearing in mind that there is already smart regulation in pharmacovigilance. We have the GVP. It has been very successful for the last 10 years in adjusting. So there could be some early wins in this area, by even just mentioning the AI piece, if you like. I'm sorry, I'm kind of rambling on, but I think it could be an area for I would suggest that the group could consider this area, and if there is any possibility of further collaboration with some of these groups, like CEOMS, that would be very, very welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, very quick comment from my end. There is a big purple line on the methodology working party preparing guidance, and we did identify pharmacovigilance as one of the areas to start fairly early. Can't give a precise planning, but that's certainly foreseen in that purple area, and I think that's one point. The other point which we will also explore is collaboration. One of the reasons we have the extended expert communities is to foster broad collaboration and coming up to good guidance.
Thank you very much. I mean, there is some immediate areas, I would say, because we are finding out in the CEOMS group that when the European inspectors go to companies at the moment to look at pharmacovigilance systems, on questioning, they're finding out that AI is being used exactly for what I just said. So I think there has to be some priority to it. Thank you.
I just wanted to compliment. So in the CEOMS, for pharmacovigilance, we do have an EMA representative, and I know there's NCA representatives as well. Julie Durand was sitting over there. I don't see her at this point in time, but there's an EV workshop, vigilance workshop next room, and I think she's fighting for time there. But she's our representative, so just to point that out. Thanks.
Okay, and I think I see Jesus.
Thank you so much. So, excellent work plan. I want to emphasize perhaps 2 points here. One is on collaborations, and the international collaboration I do see is there at the ICMRA. So that's excellent, and I can only emphasize and stress how important that would be. Something that was mentioned earlier that could be relevant for the work plan would be collaboration also with the medical technology, medical device regulators and regulations going forward, because there is a lot of interaction between the two spaces, and it's going to be quite critical to have an effective AI system for many of the applications that we've talked about. So that could be valuable to have. The other thing, I always look at work plans, and think, okay, what's the goal that is trying to be achieved? And I'm sure there's many goals, and some of them are obvious. One that I'd like to see what your thoughts are on, it's something that was touched on earlier, which is the trustworthiness of AI. So how and where does this work plan drive towards trustworthiness in AI, which I believe is very important for its adoption, implementation, and effective rollout in the healthcare space. And that's something that is a matter of interest, I think, to everybody here in the room.
I think Jesper is ready to.
I'd like to just tag on to the medical device space, because obviously with how that is divided in Europe at an NCA level, that's already an imperative that we actually collaborate around those subjects and also speak globally around these at IMDRF, I think, right? So it's something we are very much aware about and are actively leaning into and trying to lead on also as well from the European side.
Okay, and I saw, sorry, I can't see your name, sorry.
It's Hanny de Munnik from AstraZeneca.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for showing and presenting this interesting roadmap. Really good that it's planned so far ahead with this challenging development. As you mentioned, that data part is part of the data committee. I think it's good, or we think it's good, that this is brought together. Maybe it is, but it's important that we will need to understand which use cases will require governance or have policies. So that's my first point. I have 4 in total. In terms of tools and technology, which was presented, improving the productivity and the simplification of administrative tasks is a good safe use case to start with, we think. Within AstraZeneca, we are working on a number of initiatives there. The third bullet is that we use of the large language models will require some guidance in our view, especially the way they work when they are narrative and it creates new content. The foundation models would need to be trained with the right data to have a good output. And what data would be considered as a proprietary or confidential data, and how much can we use in these models if important. And also we need collaboration with the high-tech partners and use of open sources. Important points to consider would be, for example, cybersecurity in terms of securing the data.
Thank you. Any reactions from the panel? In terms of there was a question about the governance, maybe that's related to BDSG or future policies and guidance. Kits, any reactions?
Yes, I think the first one is broadly on the BDSG, Peter. Yeah. Jesper, I don't know if you want to come in on that. But I just wanted to go back to Jesus's. He asked a question of where's the trustworthiness on the document. So if I go back to the white paper on AI from the Commission, trustworthiness for them was having responsible practices that follow legislation, that are ethical and so on, and building frameworks that provide guardrails for those applying or practicing AI, so developing AI. And I think sort of it is peppered here, and it's very, you need to join the dots to see the picture at the end, I'm afraid, but we recognize that it comes from different perspectives. To reach the point of trustworthiness, you need a number of things. Understand it. We need to upskill ourselves. We need to think about guidance. We need to think about the correct tools, the correct approach to collaboration, and so on. And that brings us to trust. As the white paper sort of fizzled it in at the time. Thanks.
And I think Kim has a comment on efficiencies.
Just to complement in terms of how we use this technology in terms of efficiency, in the process analytics aspect area. And it's just to confirm as well that as presented yesterday, we are investing and experimenting as well how to use all this technology to make our assessment faster and also to provide you a better outcome with a higher quality. So it's not only about how we use AI in terms of healthcare data, also how we use it in terms of building the end-to-end more digital, because I believe that these new technologies will bring us to a higher level in terms of this digital transformation that we are doing at EMA as well.
Thank you, Kim. Martin?
I would also have a question regarding to collaboration. If there are any plans also for collaboration with academia, and I saw on the slide you mentioned the technical deep dive, which could be sort of one topic that comes there in my mind. And also regarding topics, maybe also what you mentioned with the technical deep dive, were also the digital twins mentioned, and I think that's sort of also one of the potential application areas, probably more high risk, especially when they're used to replace control groups. What are the plans and thoughts there?
So I think we need to flesh some of these out. There's several points of collaboration that are potential there. So we cast a wide net to collaborate, and obviously academia is a key stakeholder in that sort of collaboration network. There's certain things you can establish, and those are already identified, and then the other ones might be sort of more iterative, point-in-time based initiatives like the deep dives that you mentioned and so on. I don't know if we need to complement, Peter.
Maybe just a comment. I mean, this is not a commitment, but it sounds like a good idea in my head at the moment. Maybe the topics. So we've had a number of messages before the coffee break on focusing down on specific areas. Use cases were another one. Maybe these are things that we could, dare I say, even consult the wider community on to feed into the selection of what workshops we're going to hold, what hackathons we're going to hold, what deep dives we're going to hold. And the fact that industry is an important partner in that, I think, goes without saying, actually. So that's a commitment.
Thank you. I think, Stephen, please.
Yeah, thank you. Much of the work plan is internally focused. So things that the agency will do in order to ensure that its staff get the best from AI, and that in turn will support public guidance, policy, and regulation. I was particularly unclear, though, in the section on guidance, policy, and product support, there's a reference to, it says guidance on the use of large language models will be developed. And I wasn't clear whether that was for internal consumptions to help people who might be thinking about using it for personal productivity, or whether it was a sort of published public guidance. But in any event, if it is for public use, I would encourage some very sort of clear thinking about the areas of application, because large language models are so broad and so general in the way they're developed and are intended for use, that without that context-specific guidance, it becomes almost without value, I would suggest.
Please.
Well, thanks, Stephen. This is meant for the network itself, and it's based on rules and regulations that we need to abide by. The data we have, data privacy, data protection considerations, and so on. And they might be simple rules as well, but they're not meant for public consumption at this time. Thanks.
Thank you. Is it time to maybe see if there's questions from online?
Yeah, we have a set of questions, maybe focusing on those with affiliations. And we have a question from Merck Italy on including representatives and experts from IT tech companies into workshop and discussions. Maybe that's a question for the workshop organizers, if this was on the agenda. And we have a question on from CureVac Sweden on preparedness of the network for the coming expected wave of applications. And maybe that's a general question to the training and preparing part of this work plan. And maybe these two questions should be addressed. Thanks.
Who's well positioned? You, Luis?
So I'll take the first one on IT tech representation. So when we were planning the workshop, we obviously would welcome to have somebody that could walk us through large language models. Yeah, not necessarily something they're very interested in attending, a very niche topic discussion. But the deep dives are planned to have IT sort of like data science, core data science, and machine learning engineers. So I don't think we've closed the door to that, and we'd like to have people around. In terms of preparedness, I think that has to do not just with the planning, but also staffing and other stuff. It's more strategic than I can provide. Thanks.
Maybe you could take a couple of comments, because I would be interested in Jesper's perspective from the Danish agency, Kit from Methodology Working Party. But essentially, preparedness is multi-layered. I mean, there's the training element that was highlighted, which is about capability, but there's also a capacity issue. If so, there was a comment earlier this morning about number of applications for qualification through Scientific Advice Working Body. Can we handle the numbers? And then there's processes, aren't there? And do we have the right business processes to handle AI, which may not fall neatly within existing business processes? And I think the work plan, and it is quite high level, but does address all three to some extent. But I don't know, Jesper, I mean, from a national competent authority and maybe big data steering group perspective?
Well, a bit of both, maybe that. I think it's great we actually have this 4-year plan and plan to revise it as soon as we start to realize it's going to change in a half year, right? Try to think half a year back and realize where we are today. Well, it really sets the scene also from the NCA perspective, because obviously we take color of this in the sense that what we have gone about to do is also to set our own plans and how to do our own experimentation. We didn't share all of that yesterday, only some of it, But I mean, we also have in-house large language models that we actually deploy in our supercomputer infrastructure. A number of us have supercomputer infrastructure available in our setting on our ministries. So obviously we put that to use. And some of that will feed into that learning, and the experimentation will also lead into that going forward. But I also like to, on the other question about tech companies, and I think I know Kit and I are in the same boat on some of these projects. There are Horizon Europe projects we're involved in. We actually do have these tech companies to sit together with us to co-develop solutions according to the call text and our idea about how the research should look like around digital twin and generative AI and synthetic control arms, etc., and what else not. And there are more of these coming. And I think we're all really willing to step in and collaborate as long as we agree on the principles of this being open science and available to everyone in terms of what we create there. So we are there for sure. And I think also you can always call upon regulators to take part in advisory boards and what else not. I think we articulate that very particularly from the EMA on the Horizon Europe calls as well, by the way. So definitely there to listen to the innovation happening also with tech vendors.
Thank you, Jesper. So a little time check here, Peter. Do you want us to go into the wrap-up, see if there's more questions?
Listen, I think we have a hard stop at 1, but what we do between now and 1 is entirely up to us. So if there's still, because listen, this is the opportunity for the people in the room and the people online to ask questions, but also to provide suggestions for enriching this work plan. There's not going to be a written public consultation, although it will be a living document, as has been said. So if people have got additional suggestions, looking at the swim lanes that are in front of you, speak now or forever hold your peace, well, for at least a month or 2.
We could take one, maybe a quick question from the chat in addition. This digital academy, which is mentioned here, the question was raised yesterday also, if this is a completely internal endeavor, or if this could be open to also foster collaboration and communication on that. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So I believe that it was presented yesterday. Digital Academy is an initiative for internal EMA and also for the network, but we are open to have ideas how to enrich it with more use cases from the industry as well. So yeah, it's something that we can discuss it.
That wasn't the question, was it? No. The question was, might we open it up as an offering to stakeholders outside? Yeah.
Yep.
I think that was what the answer is. Listener, can I answer that as an EMA? If stakeholders want that, tell us that. We can't make a commitment now because no decision has been made. But if that's the message from stakeholders, let us know, and we then take that and try and see what we can do.
So yes, we do. So, very quickly, not a new stream. It's a cross-cutting stream running all across the other streams. It's a communication aspect which was mentioned, and it can link very nicely to the academy and other discussions we're having on infodemic, on managing access to information, and so on. So it would be nice to have not a new stream, but a cross-cutting stream for all of these topics. And I think also potentially will help engagement, because some things are in the paper, but hearing the comments, I don't think they're recognized for what they are, being too technical. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. So Peter, do you want me to go through a few points that I captured, and Jörg maybe?
Yeah,
so we'll try to do a joint wrap-up. I first have to say, joining the session so late at the end, it feels like drinking from the water hose. And so here's what I got out of the water hose. So I think there was a point made about the work plan has an internal focus. It's internal in the sense of network, but maybe that's an evolution of the work plan to also provide more external focus there. I think there were a lot of comments on the area of guidance and policy, a question about how do we deal with the use of AI in clinical trials, the AI Act being quite generic, but then so there's a need for more sector-specific guidance. On the tools and technologies, I picked up that there's a desire to maybe collaborate more with the tech companies and really get them into the dialogue too. Training and collaboration, we talked about the Digital Academy, whether this can be opened up to the stakeholders. Collaboration at the international level with FDA obviously is critical, ICMRA, and then also with the medical device regulators, which is already happening at the NCA level. And I think that's pretty much the quick snapshot of what I captured. Jörg?
No, I don't have to add much, but I sense that there's some acknowledgement of this, and overall, it was already said that this is not set in stone, but will be updated, also depending on needs and further feedback. Thanks.
So I think we're going to give the floor to Jesper to wrap up and close.
Thank you, and thank you for moderating this discussion here and the work plan being prepared as well, Luis. Really appreciate the effort gone into that, because this really sets the scene of and the transparency around us as regulators and how we want to proceed on this. And do bear in mind, although it's our work plan, there's definitely elements in there that are with public consultation and public facing. And in the name of transparency, that's actually why we discussed this as well with you. And I really appreciate the feedback we had here today from many of you on, in particular, the reflection paper. And this is probably the most important thing I can repeat here. It has a deadline by the end of December for your comments. We really need them, obviously, so we can revise, as we're saying we're going to do, but also, as you see in these swim lanes, going to develop the appropriate guidances in a prioritized order in terms of relevance. And obviously, we could ideally wish we could do all of them at once, but I'm looking at a kit and realizing we only have so many resources, but we'll definitely do our utmost to make sure that we do most of the time we have. So that being said as well, I think I would just like to thank everyone for an active participation today and yesterday in particular. I think this is something that gives us comfort in that we are on the right direction, although it's a direction where you can find a little bit difficult to navigate once in a while. So these discussions are really, really important for us to help navigate in where that direction should take us first, and then probably we'll do a bit of winding and we'll eventually, through learning and experimentation, get into the right situation in the future. I'd really like to, on a final note, to encourage, as we committed to saying that we are going to experiment, we're going to share the learnings, we're going to be transparent around this. Also, again, like to ask tech vendors, industry and academia to embrace that together with us, because mutually we will definitely advance the field on that. So with that note, I'd really like to thank you for your active participation. 31st of December is the deadline for commenting, and then I can let you go for lunch. Thank you.